Rosanna, don't you cry for me. I'm gonna dig up what's of gold, V for victory.
A Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, like Teddy did at San Juan Hill. And this is no baloney. Say a little great big teeth. He shoots at him to take you up. He shoots at him to eat you up. To rain, to rain, to rain, to rain, to rain.
You ain't just whistling, Dixie!
Scram, Sherlock. I'm working this side of the street.
Well, something new has been added.
I'm only 3.5 years old. I like him. He's silly.
How does that moron do it? I'll find out his secret if it's the last thing I ever do.
Oh, pardon me, madam. I didn't mean to.
Then hold him all right. Phooey.
Hello, welcome to another Director Retrospective video. And this is for Bob Clampett, Part 2. I know you guys have been waiting for this, and, you know, I'm so excited, and my guests are excited as well. And as always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to subscribe. So firstly, returning from Part 1, pretty much acting like the guy from the draft board, just showing up at every bleeding moment. I open the door and Manny's there, you know. He said, please, I gotta be in Part 2. Please, I gotta be in Part 2. But, no, well, he's here, so say hi, Manny.
Well, now, I wouldn't say that.
Yes, I can't wait to talk about that one. That was a really good cartoon. But we do have two new guests in this one. First of all is my Canadian brother, and I'm actually not sure why he's here, but, you know, I thought, you know, throw him a bone for this one. No, I kid. He's my good friend Blue Genocide. Say hi.
Hey, I'm really happy that I get to talk about the cartoons that we lost all the commentaries on. Thanks, Warner Brothers.
Yay! Thank you, Warner Brothers. And lastly, but certainly not least, we've got the mad Clampett fan himself, Huey Nelson. Say hi.
What's up, Doc? Glad to be here to discuss my favorite director of all time.
That's why you're here, because I definitely thought, you know what, if someone's going to give some good insights, it's going to be definitely you. So this is going to be a lot of fun, boys. Just to start things off, in Part 1, we discussed Clampett's original unit. So he had the black and white unit, he was doing Porky Pigs for the longest time until the very end. And then Tex Avery leaves the studio, and essentially Clampett takes over Tex Avery's unit. So you have three cartoons. One is The Cagey Canary, 2 is Aloha Hui, and 3 is Crazy Cruise, where they don't have a director's credit. It was essentially started by Tex Avery, but finished by Clampett. To start things off, I will say about those three cartoons, honestly, they're fine, but they do feel more Tex Avery, so it feels like Clampett was just polishing them off just to get them out the door, so to speak. So
For Aloha Hui, I kind of enjoyed the slow pacing of the cartoon, where you would think they're fighting over the native girl, where you would think it would be a typical, the seagull and the crow, they're going to fight over this native girl, but kind of trying to impress her. And I kind of like the ending where he fights off that giant gorilla, and the seagulls, he's technically cool with the fact that the crow ends up being the native girl at the end. But the gags are a little slow here and there, but they're still funny to an extent. I do want to see this cartoon restored.
yes.
This Laserdisc copy is pretty faded and a little bit blurry. I would like to see it crisped in HD. Maybe this native girl, she may be a stereotype. We'll see when we'll cross that bridge if we come to it.
Oh, exactly right. I've seen a few cartoons I never thought would be restored and released, but they end up being released, so who knows? But Blue, what are your thoughts on these ones?
I have a hard time remembering them. I do remember Cagey Canary the most of the three of them. I just listened to Huey talk about Aloha Hui, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I remember that. Yeah, we did that one together. But honestly, all three of them were pretty honestly. They definitely felt a little half-baked, but I do think that KG Canary is probably the best of the three. That actually had a really funny twist ending, in my opinion, with the both of them getting kicked out. Yeah, I really did like that cartoon a little bit. You know, it's nothing compared to the later Sylvester and Tweeties, but definitely pretty good. Don't remember much about the other two.
Well, I can tell you about Crazy Cruise, it's probably one of the worst ones because it was essentially just leftover spot gags cartoons that Tex was doing. It just felt like it was just pasted together and then see you later.
Like I said, I'm pretty sure I was on with you with all three of those like 10 months ago. I don't remember anything about Crazy Cruise.
Fair enough. So Manny, any thoughts?
All three cartoons have their moments, some moments that are funny, some that are kind of like meh. It is a kind of like a nice way of seeing the transition between the two units and how Clampett was starting to branch away from the Avery influence and start doing more of his own thing. And like what Huey said, I am dying to see Aloha Hui restored because the other two have fortunately been restored, and it stinks that Aloha Hui is the odd man out.
All right, but after this, we finally go all in to the actual proper Clampett cartoons, because let's not kid ourselves. When people think Bob Clampett, these are the cartoons, well, mostly anyway, are the ones that they would think of, the color ones. So we're going to start off with Wabbit Wobble, and this one a lot of you would have seen. This is one of the more famous ones. And of course it's got Fat Elmer, and you know, and of course it's
Chungus.
got a particularly
Big Chungus.
Yes, it's got that moment in there, of course. But this one, rumor has it, this one was also started by Tex but finished by Clampett, but I can't confirm that rumor, but it definitely feels like it. But Bluey, what would you like to say about Wabbit Wobble?
I'm surprised there wasn't a fist fight with this one, but I gotta say, like, the first cartoon with Avery's studio, and I do believe that this cartoon was very much started by Avery but finished by Clampett as well, because there's just so much Avery in it. Honestly, I feel like it's really great because it has moments of both directors' styles, and I love this cartoon. I saw it when I was a little kid on the first Golden Collection. I'd say that, you know, I remember that being on disc 1 with Bugs Bunny and the Three Bears, Elmer's Candid Camera, because they have to throw that on everything for some reason, and Bugs Bunny and the Three Bears. But this is the cartoon that I remember loving the most on that disc, and it's just great gag after great gag. Like, you guys already brought up Chungus, and honestly, that was never a memorable moment for me. I'm kind of surprised that became a meme in the first place, but my favorite bit was always with the bear.
Of course.
The bear is just great, and I do love the little trickery Bugs does with the glasses and everything. I could keep going. I can make an entire hour-long video about Wabbit Trouble, but I'll just say that it's probably one of the greatest cartoons ever made.
It's solid. It's solid. And another very short cartoon, because we're going to make a slight detour, because America around this time got into the war due to Pearl Harbor, and we get this nice little short cartoon, Any Bonds Today. Sadly, it does have one part that's a bit on the stereotype side, but it's got some wonderful animation, and the song is definitely catchy. I mean, Manny, what are your thoughts on Any Bonds Today?
I love the theme song of this cartoon. It was composed by the great composer Irving Berlin, and one that I hope that, despite the middle section with the Al Jolson stereotype in it, I would love to see this one restored. And it's funny how, Blue, you were talking about with Wabbit Wobble, how the whole fat bug scene became the Big Chungus meme, but it's kind of strange too. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, that they took one of the scene of Bugs Bunny in blackface and turned it into, I think it was Sonic or like some other character, and that became a meme as well. I saw the picture floating around the internet, and I'm like, do people actually know the context behind the original picture? Like, Wabbit Wobble's a different story, but for this one, I'm like, come on, guys, like, really?
Yeah, I remember that image because it came around the same time as a Jeopardy thing where somebody saw a picture of Sonic and said it was, quote, Danky Kang or something like that.
Danky Kang.
And yeah, so bizarre. I mean, Huey, what are your thoughts on Any Bonds Today?
Well, for Any Bonds Today, it's a pretty catchy song. That was probably, I think, where I could say that was kind of a rare cartoon for me when I had the Laserdisc. I didn't even know it existed until I seen it on the Laserdisc copy. I do frankly want it restored. I kind of just roll my eyes at that Al Jolson at this point. I mean, I'm this far into Looney Tunes, so you kind of just roll your eyes at some of these stereotypes, and you're just like, again.
Yeah.
Insert obligatory stereotype. It's a good propaganda cartoon.
My big thing about it is just I hope it's restored, and again, minus the stereotype, it does hold an important place in the studio's history, and for historical context too. I mean, this one is 100% war propaganda, but it's a good tool to learn from.
Now, the next one is kind of important. It's actually one of the longest Looney Tunes cartoons made. It's not the longest, but it's one of the longest. For Horden Hatches the Egg, which is the only time that they would adapt a Dr. Seuss book. And Dr. Seuss himself would even work with the Warner unit in regards to the Private Snafu cartoons. But this one is such a feast for the eyes. It's one of the most perfect adaptations of a Dr. Seuss book, and it also just shows you don't need an hour and a half to adapt one of these books, and I'm looking at you, Illumination, but it's...
Less is more.
Oh, exactly right.
If anyone's seen those 1970s Dr. Seuss cartoons that were like the half an hour where you got the Sneetches, Green Eggs and Ham, Lorax, the Cat in the Hat, the 1970s adaptions. But this one, I think maybe is the first cartoon where it's under 10 minutes. They managed to adapt the book canonically and then also put in a little bit of Clampett's humor in there.
Oh, yes. Aiming straight for his heart. And, of course, we see something else. One of the best moments of the cartoon, and visually it looks amazing. It's clearly Clampett's style, but it also respects the source material too, and I think it's an amazing cartoon. I know Blue begs to differ. I know he didn't have a big opinion on it when he did the commentary track.
Oh yeah, just out me after that video has been taken down, and I can pretend I never No, it's a very pretty cartoon. I just think the pacing is very slow, and it's a very slow cartoon for Warner Brothers standards.
That's fair enough. I mean, but like I said, I like it as an adaptation, and I think it works out pretty well. But the next one, I'm just about sure everyone's seen this because it is a public domain short, and I love public domain because I don't get picked up on copyright on YouTube and such. But
Yay.
Blue, who hasn't seen Wacky Wabbit? It's got one of the greatest renditions of Oh Susanna, probably the only good one in my mind. And Blue actually agreed he's going to sing the whole Oh Susanna.
No, I just said you wanted me to do it again. I didn't say I was going to.
Oh, all right. Well...
Oh, Susanna, won't you cry for me? Yeah, there you go.
Why is my sub count just going backwards all of a sudden? Oh, in any case, what are your thoughts anyway, Blue, on that cartoon? Because it's a great cartoon.
Well, like I think I said, there's also a little bit of talk of Tex starting this one. I don't think he got very far with it because a lot of the plot of the cartoon involves Elmer saving up for the war, which obviously dates the cartoon, but that's beside the point. It's a very fun cartoon if it's a little bit mean-spirited because Elmer basically does nothing to Bugs in this one, and Bugs is just there to heckle him. However, we have one of the only times they've ever tried to have continuity in these shorts too. Elmer already knows who Bugs is, and that's pretty interesting. I think that's in there. Otherwise, it's a very good cartoon. It's definitely not as good as Wabbit Trouble, but it's a very good one.
I love the Wacky Wabbit. Who hasn't seen that? Like you said, Clampett kind of didn't really follow the formula where Bugs has to be provoked. Here he's kind of just doing what he did in Wabbit Trouble. He's kind of just trolling, and Elmer hasn't really done anything yet to initiate for Bugs to just troll his enemy. Some of the gags are still good. I like where Bugs says, "Ain't he a stinker?" That's a funny part where he buries Elmer.
My favorite gag I forgot to mention is the girdle.
Yeah, I honestly think if Bugs wore that skull he was wearing over his head when he kind of popped up singing the old Susanna scene, if he wore that the whole cartoon, it kind of would emphasize the wacky portion of the title. I don't know, just something about him wearing that. If he wore that for the whole cartoon, it kind of would make it even more funny.
Getting back to what you were saying before, that he was just pretty much trolling. I think, as we all know, Bugs only just got created, and he's only just becoming a star. I think they just haven't figured out exactly what he was supposed to be. That's just how it is with development of characters, just like season 1 of Simpsons, where Homer sounds more like Walter Matthau. See, there's a Simpsons reference right there, Manny. See?
It's the first one.
Go anywhere. That's right, we'll have a counter happening, and of course Blue's just rolling his eyes, as usual. I'm not seeing his face, but I know he's doing it. But the next one, people are not going to really know about this one. This one's lesser known. It's called Nutty News, and this was, I guess, another of Clampett's attempts to do a spot gag cartoon in the vein of Tex Avery. Thankfully, while not all the jokes perhaps worked, like some worked better than others, at least I had a good laugh. Like, especially the artist painting his thumb instead of the model he's got in front of him, and yeah, just silly things like that. I mean, I could think of worse things.
I've seen this before. A couple of gags actually did stand out. I kind of like how Elmer is actually the narrator and not Robert C. Bruce, like the usual Spot gag cartoons are. I kind of like that little barbershop gag, the pop-out Hitler, and then the hunting season. That could be Willoughby, the dog from the heckling hair, and he kind of just appears and he says, "Give me a kiss or I'll tell them where you are." That kind of... Those jokes did kind of land.
Yeah, so it's definitely, out of all the Clampett Spot gag shorts, this one's definitely one of the stronger ones. I will say that. And then, you know, speaking of strong cartoons, just about everyone's going to know Bugs Bunny Gets the Boyd, right? I mean, you got early Bugs Bunny, of course, again, but we get introduced to a certain character.
I think this is my favorite one. I've watched this with my friends recently, and they die of laughter whenever he goes, "Oh, nope. They kind of just love his character because the way he just, how goofy, they kind of like how he acts. And I think Clampett actually used the formula for Bugs here, where Bugs has to be attacked before he begins his usual shtick. Even though Beaky is listening to his mother's orders to find something to eat, in the grand scheme of things, he's resulting in him attacking Bugs. So Bugs is going to defend himself. But a lot of people say Bugs is kind of mean here, but not really mean. He's defending himself. It's kind of not his fault that his opponent is kind of not all there.
But we can appreciate the acting, though, with Bugs, where he thinks his body's all gone and he's just feeling the rib cage in that one scene. That's a great scene. I mean, when I did the track for that one, I didn't think too much about it, but I'm looking back thinking maybe I was a little harsher on it. But, is it a bad cartoon? Not by a long shot. I quite enjoy it.
Like you said, the gags are pretty... I kind of like where Clampett goes to his usual juvenile jokes where Bugs slowly comes out in drag and he says, "You naughty, naughty boy." And you see Beaky blushing as if he just peeked on a female in the shower. I kind of like that scene.
But the next cartoon is Wacky Blackout. And this one, a lot of people may not know as well, because it's also the second last black and white cartoon that Clampett did in the official filmography. I'm not counting snafus here. But Wacky Blackout is yet another Spot gag cartoon, similar to Nutty News, although it does get very patriotic towards the end. And man, the animation in this one is just incredible, and it's a sign of things to come. Especially, I think there's like a cow and there's like an old cat towards the end, and I'm just trying to remember some of it. But wow, like Wacky Blackout, even if you don't find the jokes funny, like the animation is incredible.
For Wacky Blackout, it is a Spot gag cartoon, but it's a war Spot gag cartoon. So you can, and kind of there's a few gags that I actually enjoy, and I think Mel Blanc's voice acting when it comes to these Clampett cartoons is phenomenal. I'll give him a lot of credit for that. And there's a couple of gags. There's a scene where there's a Orson-like bird with the a mother bird teaches her baby bird to fly. It gives us a hint of what Tweety will look like, but it doesn't really sound like him. He kind of has a more raspier voice. And there's a scene that I tend to enjoy where there's this goofy dog in the doghouse, and he's trying to court this female dog, and he's just like, "I wish there was a blackout," and he just turns off the light. And that's just why I like where Mel Blanc's voice acting is, and the Rob Scribner animation. He's like, "Blackout!" and he's just going crazy, and you see he's covered in smooches every time he turns off the light.
Of course. And leading to the next one is the end of an era, really, which, again, aside from Private Snafu, this was the last black and white cartoon that Clampett did, which is Eating on the Cuff, or The Moth Who Came to Dinner. And this one is very interesting because you've got live action intro and outro. We've got this moth character, and I thought that this was a nice little gem. It was a lot of fun. I mean, I'm not sure why that comedian was dubbed over by Mel Blanc. I think it was just they didn't have any audio recording equipment or whatever at the time. For the last black and white short by Clampett, he certainly goes out on a bang. I mean,
for Eating on the Cuff, I kind of enjoyed that one as well. The live action, I think the end of the live action where Moth is like, oh yeah, and just kind of eats the piano player's clothing. I think because they used Mel Blanc's voice, because I think they didn't want to really pay for a small bit of a part that they're gonna have in this cartoon.
If I may interject, sorry, Huey. I think that probably the reason why Mel did the voice, and I could be wrong, so like this speculation, but I'm guessing that the camera that they used to film the live action footage was only shot in, it had no sound to it, so they would have to dub in the voice later. Kind of like what happened with You Ought to Be in Pictures, where they shot it, but there was no sound, and then Mel Blanc and the other guys dubbed their voices later on. The name of the actor, Leo White. And if I'm not mistaken, he was Polish, actually. I was going to say British. But he was born in Germany, but grew up in England, and I don't know, I'm just checking off the cuff. I see what I did there. But yeah, I'm guessing it was a technical limitation.
The Black Widow spider is kind of like a Pepe Le Pew in a sense, where this old widow-looking female is pursuing this young moth. And there's the scene where I kind of like where the bee, with the female bee and the Black Widow spider, they put their stingers on there, sword fighting kind of with their butts. And it's kind of, you would expect this of Clampett. Make something funny out of this.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice little gem. It's also in the public domain, so definitely anyone can check that out online. But moving on to the Hepcat, and this one is also start of a new era. This is when the Looney Tunes and Merry Melody series it didn't matter anymore which was which. They just put whatever on, and that was that. And this one, is an incredible cartoon with some wonderful animation as usual. I mean, you're going to hear me saying wonderful animation about all of these because, let's face it, they're all got wonderful animation. But this one especially is just got some ridiculous jokes.
So first of all, that is not a Sylvester prototype. No one better say that in the comment section. I'll be watching. I'm so sick of people saying, "Oh, that's a prototype for..." No. All right.
No, it's a Hepcat. It's a Hepcat. Move on.
He's got to be one.
I can
of the
imagine
greatest...
Blue with a rolled up newspaper about to hit somebody in the head.
Yeah, well, I've seen it enough. That cat has got to be one of the greatest Looney Tunes one-shot characters of all time. Pretty much up there as one of the greatest. Like, he is so just charming and funny to like listen to and watch, and the premise is great, and the voice acting is on point for everybody involved. I will say, I think this is one of the better one-shot cartoons that the studio ever did.
I totally agree. Yeah, and of course we love the whole, something new has been...
Well, I would like to say, I actually would like the original copy of this cartoon, because this cartoon the way the erratic nature of this cartoon feels like I need to hear the faster merry-go-round broke down for this cartoon. For some reason, I don't take it. Like, I would rather hear the faster version of the merry-go-round broke down and the merrily we roll along for this specific cartoon, because it feels like you would need to hear that for this short. But also, Clampett actually faster. His cartoons get more violent and around this point, and you can actually see how fast-paced this cartoon is. And then the gags are hilarious for that matter, especially the end gag where Cat is basically content with the puppet, and he just says, "Well, I can dream, can't I?" And it's just it's I don't, my mind is in the gutter. I can already tell what the joke was for that gag, and you can already tell what he meant by he can dream with that.
Of course, and that's the great thing about these shorts. They were not made for kids, essentially. They were shown with other movies and other, newsreels and whatnot at the time. And so, of course, you're going to get these cheeky little jokes put in. And I've always seen this as a challenge for Clampett anyway, to see what he can get away with, before any form of censorship could be applied. And speaking of, censorship, there was actually a joke in the next cartoon, A Tale of Two Kitties, in terms of, I wish I could give the bird, But we got the Tale of Two Kitties. That's, I think it's the first appearance of a certain character which may or may not have taken off after this point. I wonder who could that be.
Gee.
Today you're a pretty cat.
That's right. And of course, Tweety in this point was, well, naked, allegedly. That's, was apparently a big thing by the third appearance. But you've of course got these other two cats, which is just hilarious. It's an incredible cartoon, great gags, and I've seen this one heaps of times as a kid, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen this one.
I was gonna say I love this one because Tweety is essentially a badass here. Kind of gives me the Jerry Mouse kind of guy, where he isn't afraid to stand up for himself. He doesn't hide behind Granny. In his later appearances, and I kind of like this naked Tweety. He does symbolize an actual, legitimately baby bird here. And I kind of like the voice acting of the Abbott and Costello caricatures, especially Mel Blanc and Ted Pierce are doing a good job. But I never really seen Abbott and Costello in anything. But the way Ted Pierce and Mel Blanc seem to work in portraying these guys seem pretty accurate. Compared to if I do see anything with them in it. I also kind of enjoy how the atmosphere, the backgrounds at every failed attempt, the day changes from, it's early morning, and now it's, I think, maybe midday, and then it goes to sunset, and then the last failed attempt is at night. I think anyone noticed that.
I didn't. Honestly, I didn't realize it just happened so subtly. I didn't even notice that. That's actually a good point. I really didn't notice that. But then again, I'm just an idiot anyway, so, what do I know? Now, I suppose I should put a car brakes on because the next one, I've got to put some context to it, and then I'll get you to discuss Huey, and that's, of course, the infamous Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs. So just to put into context for people who aren't aware, there was 11 cartoons that were issued to be shown on television, but due to the depictions of African Americans within, they were subsequently then removed from television broadcasting, which therefore, and they become infamous for that particular reason. And I gotta say, Coal Black might be one of the most frustrating cartoons to discuss, because on the one hand, yes, you've got all these stereotypes abounding, although the irony is that the photo that seems to be shared around is the one with the big nose, but that's of course out of context because they're making fun of Jimmy Durante in that one bit. But that aside, you've got that, and then of course you've got the unfortunate World War II "we kill Japs for free" joke too. But there's still so much to love about it too. Like, it's got amazing music. They actually, for at least one part of it, use an actual African-American band in one part. And Rod Scribner's animation, especially in the kissing scene, is incredible. And some of the jokes are genuinely funny. Sadly, I think this one's a bit dated. It's not a straightforward Snow White parody. They put all these war references, which of course, immediately dated.
Well, this is going to be a long one, so brace yourself.
So strap in.
As a black man, and this is a cartoon, the music and the Clampett's gags are on point. Everything is, I can say, I'm glad they use an African-American band. The voice acting is pretty good. Some of the gags are landing, but still kind of fell into the ignorance of the especially with the imagery, where they don't even look human. I'm gonna just separate this for gender specifically. This cartoon kind of affects the black woman a little bit more, because around this time there was, even before that, the black woman was labeled as more promiscuous and these Jezebel stereotypes. It still kind of plagues them to this day, even in modern day media, where they use black women as darker skin or maybe brown skin, but they're more of they're even from young, they make them fast, promiscuous, basically. They kind of make them seem like, when you look at a black woman, you can't give into they can't give into their primal urges. It's just, and it's the same thing with the black male. It kind of makes them seem like, the black male he can't give into his primal urges, and the black woman is promiscuous. They kind of put these stereotypes on us, and you can see where So White, as she calls herself, she's wearing in the Disney Snow White, she's kind of dressed more respectable, but she's still beautiful, where here her outfit is generally kind of in a promiscuous fashion. This is the over hyper sexualization of the black female, where black women actually do love to be next to Caucasian females, the standard definition of beauty. They like being pretty, but there's a difference of hyper sexualizing them and just only seeing them for just their bodies. Like you can see a bunch of black women on, you may see them on Twitter and on Instagram shaking their butts, but that doesn't mean that they are human beings. They are beautiful as well, but they also have thoughts and feelings and emotions just like other women. They're not someone you can just look at, oh, I have a primal urge to bed one and just go about my merry way. They're not the type of women like that. They're women just like everyone else, and society labels them as more fast and easy. And this is where you can see in So White where she's kidnapped by the guys that kidnapped her, saying we killed Japs for free. And there's also where she's kissing her kidnappers, and then she does it again in the army to the little army dwarves. And then also there's the other stereotype, the mammy role that black women seem to play as well, that tends to plague them, where specifically in the future in the media, black women seem to play only those two roles. And it's worse is now, even in weird culture that's dominated by black people, they tend to internalize these stereotypes, where even in rap music, you see darker skin or brown skinned females shaking their butts in rap music, and also adding more fuel for people to see these stereotypes. So on both sides are kind of making it worse when black women want to get away from this stereotype, because there's never been a positive representation of black women in the media. The animation is good. I kind of like Rob Scribner's animation here, where it gets all wild, especially when the dwarf, I think this dwarf is most likely Dopey, where he kisses So White at the end. Also, if I actually didn't notice until later on that's the same voice actor who plays the Mammy Two Shoes in the Tom and Jerry shorts.
It is indeed. Really love the extra insight you've given to it. But with the next one, and I'm going to be throwing in a Simpsons reference very shortly, but it's Tortoise Wins by a Hair, which Manny wants to talk about, but it's similar to that Simpson joke where it's like, oh, there was a dog by the name of Lassie that was killed. It's like, and now here's Homer Simpson, because we get this really funny short straight after a really serious discussion on Cold Black, so apologies Manny for that, but of course this is the second of the trilogy, the Cecil Turtle trilogy, and it's really wild, and again got some great animation. Some of the gags just, this is one that you freeze frame, especially in the beginning when Bugs is pacing backwards and forwards. It's just, you see some really crazy stuff.
I think the only appropriate response after hearing Huey's thoughts on about Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs is that lady from The Simpsons yelling, "You awful man!" Or "Be quiet, you awful man," because that's how I feel right now after that. So, Tortoise Wins by a Hair. One of my personal favorite Warner Brothers shorts. One of the best the studio ever made. It is, in my humble opinion, and hopefully the other three gentlemen will agree, in the Bugs Bunny Cecil Turtle trilogy, Turtle, Tortoise, it doesn't matter, they're all the same. Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, Raphael. There's my Ninja Turtle reference for the day. Cowabunga dudes. And just so many great things to talk about it. You were saying, Anthony, you could just freeze frame every single frame of this cartoon, and you're just going to have an absolute gem. And in particular, I just love the scene when Bugs is reviewing the film and I like the little, nod to continuity in the Warner Brothers shorts, because continuity, what's that? But when he's reviewing the film from 1941's Tortoise Beats Hare, and just the expressions of anger and frustration. I got an athlete's physique. I even got athlete's foot. And just how insane Rob Scribner goes on that scene. But I also love at the end, at the final freakout, how it cuts from Scribner to Robert McKimson within like a second. And I just love that contrast animation, going from the absolute brilliant insanity of Scribner to just how McKimson was the best animator the studio ever had when it came to pure draftsmanship. But I just love that switch of style. I mean, I can go on and on and on how much I love this cartoon. So funny. And one thing that I'm going to have to disagree with some people on the internet is that they are not a fan of the aggressive Bugs Bunny And, the biggest culprit, so to speak, would be Bob Clampett's take on the character with cartoons like this and Falling Hair and Buckaroo Bugs. And I know Blue is just dying to talk about not only Buckaroo Bugs, but, how some people have Clampett's style with Bugs Bunny. But once again, Tortoise wins by a hair. Just an absolute gem. And of course, before I forget, I was watching a compilation on Facebook yesterday of all the times that Mel Blanc screamed in the cartoons and and it's hilarious. But at the very end, when he's yelling, "You fools, I'm the rabbit!" Man, I wish I was in the studio to hear him record that line.
Oh dear, and I totally agree. I just think it's insane, and
I know I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll just say I'll make it quick. I agree with Mel's voice acting. What Manny said, I kind of reminds me of his Daffy erraticness when Mel Blanc is doing Daffy, especially when Bugs does modern design. Heard a little bit of Daffy in that when he says it, but it makes him human. But I'll probably discuss that in Falling Hair. But now we'll just move on to the next cartoon.
Yeah, speaking of wild cartoons, the Wisecracking Duck. My goodness. I keep forgetting which cartoon this is because it's got an unfortunate title that's just so generic that it's just unfortunate. But in any case, I could go on about that topic for hours. Oh man, this Daffy. It's Clampett's Daffy, but it's different from the 30s Clampett Daffy. Just, I don't know. It's more refined. It's still wild and wacky, but it's a bit more refined here. And I tell you, every time I watch this one, I always find something new. And every time I see this, there'll be a gag I've missed, or something in the background, or whatever the case may be. Huey, is that what you find when you watch this cartoon? Do you find this one, you find something new every time you see it?
A little bit. What I do enjoy the most about this, I agree with what you say, that this Daffy it's not like the Daffy from the 30s and the early 40s, during the black and white era. This is a very crazy Daffy. And only Clampett, I think, could possibly pull this off. Next to Tex Avery, in my opinion. But voice acting wise, I wish, I could agree with Manny on this. I wish I could have heard Mel Blanc in the studio when this was being recorded. I can probably see the sweat, the mic blurring up constantly from the spit from the mic and everything. I can visualize all that right now. It's him sweating crazily, just screaming into the mic, these Daffy lines. But also, I find the gags where Clampett's juvenile humor comes in, the striptease gag. That gag, I think, was the funniest gag. And then the last gag, where he shoots all of Daffy's feathers off, and then Daffy screams just violently. This is where I like Mel Blanc's voice acting. And then he just says, "Now you're cooking with gas," and you see a completely naked Daffy just covered in gravy, just pouring it on himself at the end, and it's just I cannot stop watching this cartoon.
Oh, it's fantastic! It's fantastic. But we're gonna again apply the brakes because unfortunately we've got the second of the two Sense 11 shorts that Clampett did. Tin Pan Alley Cats, and this one, although audiences wouldn't have known it at the time, is essentially a cheetah cartoon where he took bits from some of his older cartoons, directed either by him or Frizz or whoever, and just did this. And of course, it's clearly a tribute to a lot of the black musicians at the time, which he himself has said he enjoyed. And the music in this cartoon is fantastic, and some of the visuals are pretty good, but it does also come across as a very lazy cartoon, and of course you got your stereotypes aside.
Alright, so Tin Pan Alley Cats, obviously, it's part of the Censored 11, there's a ton of baggage behind it, and, I'll let Huey elaborate on it more, but I will say that in the 100 Greatest Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies book, this cartoon is part of that list. I don't know why. Because even though in the first Bob Clampett retrospective, I thought I was going to get hit in the face with a ton of, pies and Rotten Tomatoes for saying that I wasn't the biggest fan of Porky and Wacky Land, which elements of this cartoon is based off of. I don't think that this cartoon belongs on this list. Not because of the stereotyping. I mean, there are elements, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Coal Black, there are elements that have it deserves to be on that list for, for reasons. But this one, I don't think it's quite up there. There are other cartoons that I think should be on this list. Case of the Stuttering Pig in particular. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't deserve the hype that I think some people give it. Take it away, Huey.
I kind of agree with that. The stereotypes here kind of just seems like they throw in the obligatory black people love chicken. I mean, who doesn't love chicken? Then you have manly looking black women. I don't know what it is. They seem to just constantly go back and forth with when it comes to black women. It's either they make them hypersexualized or just manly looking and fat for some reason. And then there's the whole Kit Kat Club, which is pronounced KKK. But history did show the KKK was around during even earlier. It started in the 20s, so it was around during this time. It kind of just it doesn't really sit right with me at that is even there. It's like, okay, I get it, you're trying to put in the African Americans, but if they went in the theaters and watched this, some of them were not even laughing. I think the NAACP, they kind of hated a lot of these stereotyped cartoons because they were not portraying them correctly. If the voice actors seen how they were being drawn, they probably would have just turned the other cheek and said, nope, I'm not doing this. That the recording is just for the recording, but they're not really seeing how the designs are gonna look. Because if black people back then were not laughing, I think if this came out now, they sure as heck won't even be laughing.
At least those ones are I suppose, out of the way. We can all discuss, so I guess it's all uphill from here until the very end, sadly. Well, the next one is a corny concerto, which I've seen numerous times. A lot of people would have seen this one numerous times. After all, it's in the public domain. So, Manny, of course, you're a musician. What are your thoughts on corny concerto?
Oh, I love this cartoon. It is, obviously, besides the fact that it's chock full of music, in particular, the music of Johann Strauss, Tales from the Vienna Woods in the first part, and one of his most famous compositions, The Blue Danube, which makes up the second one. And just Bob Clampett firing on all cylinders, animation-wise, story-wise. I love the... I was actually rewatching Pigs in a Polka about a week or so ago, and I love the introduction of the wolf imitating Deems Taylor from Fantasia. But this one in particular, too, how Elmer completely that entire scene with Elmer introducing the selections is absolutely hilarious. And listen to the rhythm of the woodwinds, and they go around and around. And it comes out here. And I know that's a radio reference at the time, but it's just, I wish I was on a commentary for this one. It's just gush over how much I love this cartoon. It's a great tool to teach people about this music in particular. Like I said, it features the music of Johann Strauss. And what I also love about it too is that the accessibility it has being in the public domain. And one thing that kind of bums me out, because when you think of musical cartoons, you think of Jones with What's Opera Doc or, High Note or whatever. Or obviously Fritz Freleng with all the musical masterpieces he made. But a part of me wishes that Clampett, not only if Clampett just made more cartoons in general at the studio, it's a shame he left in 1945, but I would have loved to have seen more takes on his music. Because I know, from reading some of the stuff behind the scenes for Coal Black, that he was a fan of jazz, but I would also like to see how much he appreciated classical music. And in this cartoon in particular, I think he did an absolutely brilliant job portraying that classical music. And again, it's one of those instances of if only Clampett had the opportunity to make more of these musical cartoons. And I also think this one's kind of neat because, as I've said a billion times, my favorite character is Porky Pig. And it's cool to see him paired. This is the only time, with the exception of that cameo in 1964's Dumb Patrol, that Bugs and Porky are with each other, as opposed to Bugs, Daffy, and Porky. And the only time that happened was in Tashland's Porky Pig's feed. But that's just another one where it's like, man, I wish they had more opportunities to interact with each other. I know they did it in the comics, but yeah, it would have been nice to have seen that happen more. And yeah, I could just keep going on, but I don't want to. I don't want to spend forever.
Of course.
Absolutely brilliant short.
And now we have another participant for the discussion, my good friend Austin Kelly. Say hi.
Hi. Glad to be here because, these are all fantastic cartoons I get to talk about.
Moving right along with Falling Hair. I mean, this one, we've seen this one constantly, haven't we, fellas? I mean,
Yeah.
public domain,
Mhm.
it's everywhere. But thank goodness, at least, it's everywhere, but hey, it's a great one.
Yeah, well, when it comes to Falling Hair, again, just like Tortoise wins by hair, I enjoy seeing Bugs being the fall guy. For once, I like what Bob Clampett did with Bugs in this. And as you can see the difference, he has his own Bugs Bunny where he's not in control. So this makes him human. He's not in control. He's erratic. He's not the same. People complain now, well, they don't like Bugs Bunny like this, but there's going to be times where even you're not going to be in control. And that's kind of what I get from these when it comes to Falling Hair. Bugs Bunny has met his match. He has an opponent where that's on his level.
Oh, indeed. And I totally agree. I mean, what do you think, Austin? Is that a fair assessment of that?
I would think so, but I think in the end it's almost a matter of taste, like whether or not you could look at something like as radically different from the already established Bugs formula and be like, okay, do I like this? Do I not? A lot of people hate on like the mean-spirited and like victim Clampett Bugs. I mean, I'm not a fan of him. I guess I do get why people like it, but I do want to interject and say that I do think it's a great cartoon. Not necessarily because of the actual cartoon, but I think just the visuals, the scenes, the McKimson stuff, it's so fantastic. I think that's something the color Clampetts really have going for them. And I also have a little bit of sentimental attachment because I got to talk to Mark Kausler about it for like an hour and a half for your channel. So that was great. That was fantastic.
Ooh. Yeah, I can't wait to hear the rest of it at some point. We'll definitely get that sorted out for sure.
Oh, also to mention, kind of like how Clampett kind of reuses that heckling hair falling gag where heckling hair, they fall from the cliff and they're all right. They managed to land safely, just like in this cartoon. They managed to just run out of gas instead of just impacting the ground and dying from that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, of course, the World War II gag where gas was rationed back in that time period, for sure.
It is definitely one of the earliest shorts that I ever saw in my life. I was actually piling a list of, I'm going to do a screening in a few days of what got me into, theatrical animation. And almost everything on the list are a bunch of public domain cartoons like The Wacky Wabbit, Gold Rush Days, Woody Woodpecker's Pantry Panic. And on this list, I had to put Falling Hair because that's definitely one of the most notable cartoons that I saw growing up, in that beautifully faded pinkish reddish god knows what AAP print I was watching on whatever rinky-dink VHS that my mom bought. And thanks, Mom, I appreciate it.
I remember the Cartoon Craze. I think it was a green print. There was another one, that one, the Cartoon Craze, the faded red print. I remember that from the Laserdisc as well.
And
love it.
It's like it's so cool how, like, in some ways my love of Looney Tunes has gone full circle in my life. I mean, I saw Falling Hair in a faded print as a kid, and I loved it. And going to what Austin was saying to how this cartoon has a ton of fans, but also has some critics as well. And what I really love about Bugs, especially in the 40s, is that he was still a new character, and he was still being experimented with. And Clampett has had his flavor in Tashlin, and especially Freeling and Jones and so on and so forth. And then by the 50s, he stayed. He had a particular characterization that for me kind of got boring. But going back to what I was saying before, I went to seeing it on VHS as a kid, and then just being floored by how beautifully it was restored years later on one of the Looney Tunes Golden collections. And now, I get to experience Falling Hair even better because I don't have hair anymore. And that was an awful joke. And we're going to pass it right back to you, Anthony.
Please.
Oh, Hair. Sorry, wrong hair. Sorry.
I know. I know.
That's the joke.
That's the joke. That's right. Now, as I comb my beautiful head of hair back, we can discuss a cartoon involving hair in a different way called An Itch in Time. There you go. If you've seen the cartoon, you'll know exactly what I mean. But this one, introduces a cute little character which shares the same name as me, apparently. What is it? Anthony Flea? A Flea?
A Flea.
Yes. But this one is a nice one, and such a shame that the sequel done by McKimson a few years later wasn't as good. But this one's a nice little solid one, and it's got some amazing animation of the dog just being in absolute agony over this flea. But Manny, before you give your thoughts, you got to sing the song for us. I mean, you are a singer, so I expect great things from you.
All right, first note is E flat, right? Yeah. There you go. There's the first note. There'll be food around the corner. Oh, it's too late. Oh God, I have to do that. I got to do that an octave lower. There'll be food. Okay, enough. What were you gonna say, Huey?
I'll take over for Manny in that one.
We'll do a duet. Well, actually, I could be A Flea, and you could just be the dog, in the background or whatever. Just any opportunity for Mel Blanc to just make dog noises, I'll savor it up. As for the cartoon itself, it was another one of those early, you say my primordial cartoon nerd days that I would see this one on the Looney Tune Wiki page. I was looking up that they have listings of not all, but a good amount of the public domain compilations, the cartoon crazies and whatever. And I was thinking, I'm like, I had a tape of Kids Classics, I think it was called. And I found the exact tape that had An Itch in Time, Gold Rush Days, and there was another cartoon on it. And it came out the year I was born, 1988. So I'm old. But anyway, back to the cartoon itself. I mean, absolutely hilarious cartoon. I love the character designs of the dog, and Elmer in particular in this cartoon. In one scene that I've always really liked where the dog is about to scratch himself and Elmer's reading and Austin, you'll appreciate this, the Looney Tune Merry Melody comic, and he pokes his eye out. And I've always liked just the way everything's drawn in that scene, and especially when the dog is like, literally you see the beads of sweat coming on his face. And it's also kind of a very strange cartoon. Even when I saw it as a kid, I'm like, there's something quite off. But I mean, it's hilarious. Of course, the infamous suicide gag at the end, which I don't remember seeing as a kid on the tape. I mean, I definitely remembered it when I saw it on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection. And one thing that really stands out is the scene where the dog is dragging his bottom on the ground. And I know because I have a puppy right now and she's adorable, but how Clampett purposely put that scene in to say this is way too much for the Hayes office. This is inappropriate, but yet he still got it in. And a part of me is thinking, I'm like, what were the things that Clampett couldn't get away with in his cartoons?
Indeed.
Kissing? I think maybe a kissing, probably.
Oh, kissing, yeah. Or
I think
it's
depends on the kiss.
How did he fly under the radar? Yeah.
Indeed. Moving on to 1944, which, we're slowly getting towards the end, which is pretty sad. But anyway, What's Cooking Dog? This one's an interesting one because to me, it's a cheetah cartoon done right. Because it is. And there's a lot of stock footage from Hollywood, which in the most recent restoration that's been released, it looks absolutely amazing seeing old-time Hollywood like that. Plus, you got some amazing animation of Bugs Bunny, saying why he's shoo-in for this Oscar. Then, of course, they show a Frizz cartoon for some weird reason. But I saw this heaps of times on the Bugs Bunny Superstar movie, which I watched constantly. Although, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, I shamefully fast-forwarded through all the live-action bits. I know, shame on me. I know.
Yeah, I think this is a super cool one. Not really because of the entertainment value, though there's obviously entertainment in there. But I think it's like for a fan or like a nerd just looking at it, there's so much to admire. Like that stock footage, crisp in that high def print we just got off of like HBO Max a few years ago, looks really nice. And that lifelike McKimson scene where Bugs is at the table and he's imitating, Eddie G. Robinson, and I think he does like a Bing Crosby. That's super cool. There's some great draftsmanship in there. And I also think like it's super cool in the Bugs Bunny Superstar documentary. There's footage of I think it's Tom McKimson like in this clown suit, and he's posing as Bugs like with a carrot in front of like this photo background of the actual background in the scene. So like McKimson could have this live action reference. And I think it pays off really well that he had something to work with there. Because if you watch that scene back, there's some great movement, really lifelike stuff. But beyond that, it's not really remarkable. Obviously, I like the stag reel joke. I thought that was always, again, it's like how did you pull this stuff off, man? It's crazy. But that McKimson scene and the live action footage, that looking so nice, I think those both make it worth a look at least.
Indeed. It's a like I said, as a cheetah cartoon, it is absolutely fantastic, and yeah, like I said, the new restoration is just an absolute stunner because for a while it was considered to be one of the unrestorables, quote unquote. I mean, they can fix it, but it just takes a lot longer than the other ones.
I remember actually seeing this cartoon. It wasn't on Laserdisc, but I remember when they actually had a spree of Warner Brothers cartoons on YouTube during the early days of YouTube. So it was really hard. So there was this very bad quality footage of it, and I couldn't really see anything. It was so bright, you couldn't even tell. You couldn't even see the detail or anything. So when I got the Superstar DVD, from the Golden Collection, I actually seen a better version of this. That was I think the best version of this cartoon that was available at the time was the Superstar until this HBO Max print. I actually pretty much thought they were just gonna leave this short unrestored and just let it fade away in obscurity, just float away in time.
Yeah, but no, they've done a fantastic job. But moving on to the one which I know that Manny is right sitting. When are they going to get to TikTok tuckered? Well, we're here, Manny, because I know this is one of your favorite cartoons. We are here. Just to let everyone know, this was a remake because Clampett, from my observations at least, seemed to have a habit where he would always focus on certain cartoons, but then he would get a few other cartoons done quickly, which, like with What's Cooking Doc being a cheetah cartoon, this one's a remake, so you don't really have to do too much to, I guess, update it.
I've said it many times that I have a soft spot for Clampett's black and white output, mainly because I saw it constantly as a kid on Nickelodeon. But I do like this one. I think it's better than the original Porky's Bad Time story from 1937. Musically, there's just some parts in it that I absolutely adore, especially the scene where Daffy, replacing our beloved Gabby Goat, thinks that Porky has bad bladder control. And in that scene in particular, you hear Carl Stalling slip in September in the Rain. And not only I just crack up hearing the music itself, but it's just the way that it was arranged. And we got to give, obviously, credit to Milt Franklin for making the arrangement of that particular scene, which is, I'm thinking there's like a muted trumpet there. And I love how it sounds musically. And it's also like very interesting to see the contrast between the scenes that were copied from Porky's Bad Time story and then like how it goes completely into Nutty Land. I think it's in Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, but the scene where I think Rob Scribner, where Daffy's just like flipping out at the sun and he pulls out the shotgun and he shoots the moon, and it's like he does that wild take when he sees it. And it's weird seeing it go back and forth between the old Clampett unit and the new Clampett unit in terms of style. And I was actually watching a video yesterday. It's not the first time I've seen it, but a compilation of Mel Blanc yelling. And I think the first clip, yes, you guys know what I'm talking about. But like the first clip is of the boss yelling at Porky and Daffy for being late. I think that's a caricature of Ray Katz. I might be wrong there, but just Mel Blanc knocking it out of the park again with just the best screams ever put to film.
Honestly, I didn't think there was anyone else in the world who liked this cartoon as much as I did. Like, seriously, I think it's really fantastic. I don't know why. I'm a big fan of 30s Clampett, so I guess I watch it and I sort of think back to Porky's Bad Time story, but I think that one's a lot weaker. Like, there's some of the iWorks animators on it, and then Jones did some scenes, and they look oddly smooth, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. But I think the mix, like you said, with the old footage and stuff like, which is the Scribner scene, it is Scribner, where he shoots the moon with the gun. I think that's so funny. And I have to say, the soundtrack is so good. It is just one of Stalling's best. Mm-hmm. And I literally fist bumped. I mean, I was just so happy when I heard you mention Franklin. I don't think he gets enough praise. I think his arrangements are really fantastic. I wish people talked about him a lot more. But yeah, great cartoon. It's a little awkward in parts, like where you can see, like, okay, they traced this from Bad Time Story, obviously. But I think it's a fantastic one.
There's also a scene where they reuse a scene from Notes to You, Dick Bickenbach scene, where Porky throws that book, The Falcon.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh yeah.
It turns to The Falcon Returns. That's from Notes to You. Not the name of the book, but the animation scene right there. Also, yeah. I kind of feel like this is superior to Porky's Bad Time Story, mainly because Daffy, in my experience of watching this, because I think Daffy, just him and Porky just have they have a thing where I kind of like 30s Porky shorts a little, but Gabby just kind of falls short. He's kind of like Donald Duck in a way. But when it comes to just Porky and Daffy, I can get into watching that because just seeing them together is just hilarious because you don't know what they're going to get into.
Indeed. But come on, we all love Gabby, don't we? I know it's Austin's favorite character.
Oh, come on. He is. I actually want to add this real quick. He is basically Donald. I mean, I think that's what they were trying to do. I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually something Iwerks himself created when he was doing that pair of cartoons. Or he might have started Porky's Bad Time Story, actually, which would have made it 3. But yeah, he's a terribly limited, boring, dumb character, I think. I know that sounds harsh, but I think the fact that Daffy's here instead makes it a lot better.
I mean, he has some lines here and there that crack me up, like in Bad Time Story when he says, oh, you're getting water on the brain. And that always made me laugh. Just the way that Mel Blanc delivered it. And some of I know we're going back to part 1, but now we're on part 2, Electric Boogaloo. But the part is it literally Porky and Gabby where he's like, fly sweater, where's the fly sweater? Made me laugh as a kid, still makes me laugh as an adult. But I think it's just more of the delivery that Mel Blanc did in that cartoon. So yeah, I think Mel Blanc did Porky and Gabby, Bad Time Story, and I think Cal Howard did Get Rich Quick Porky. I'm just waiting for somebody to yell at me in the comments for getting it wrong.
No, you got it right.
Covering my bases now.
No, you got it right. We got it right. Now, the next one is Russian Rhapsody, which I guess it's appropriate for Manny to do this because... Oh, no, not because of the music, because Manny has actually been to Russia, so that kind of works out. This one is another great one. In fact, as much as I really find, Hitler despicable and whatnot, the animation of Hitler in this just blows me away. Like, and couple that with Mel Blanc's just ridiculous screaming, he goes, Fritz Frieling and sauerkraut, he's just ridiculous. It's one of the best moments of animation I've ever seen, with the runner-up being, of course, when Hitler sees Stalin's mask later on, and he just does that big... It's a great patriotic cartoon. It really is. I mean...
Well, I went to Russia once. I went there in 2008 when I was in undergrad, and I was in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, and I can verify that there were no gremlins in the Kremlin. So that's the first thing. When you were describing the scene with Hitler, Heinrich Binder und der Watt cooking duck, I have seen and my brother, so my older brother, he's not a nerd, but he grew up watching Looney Tunes as well. But he makes fun of me for how obsessed I am with him. But he absolutely loves that scene because it's just how ridiculous and over the top the animation is. Again, occasionally my brother just randomly starts singing "We're Gremlins from the Kremlin." So I guess he has a soft spot for this cartoon, which he honestly wouldn't have known if I didn't show it to him because, I'm a nerd. Absolutely amazing animation in this one. That Mel Blanc, if you had to pick some of the absolute best performances that Blanc did, it's so strange too because it's like, whenever we talk about problematic materials in these old cartoons and whatever, especially when we're talking about, racial stereotypes and whatever, but there's something, it's kind of strange when you understand the history of what Hitler was as a person. And he's easily one of the biggest pieces of garbage to ever exist in history. But there's just something it's kind of cathartic when you're laughing, not only at how great the animation was and the voice acting, but it's just and a part of me is wishing I was alive in 1944 to experience it and just seeing the audience laugh at this absolute piece of trash and just how great the animators were able to insult them. Because I know they always say, like, people who come into, dictatorships or authoritarian rule, what's the first thing they go after? They go after the arts. They go after visual art. They go after music. They go after, film, things that they try to censor it because that's the way for the people to send a message. And, there's no better way to just absolutely destroy and mock him in the process. And, 80 something years later, almost 80 years later, it still reverberates. And on a lighter note, it's always cool to watch a cartoon be like, oh, that's a caricature of Clampett, and that's a caricature of Schlesinger and Jones and all that. It's a nice little Easter egg hunt for us nerds when we're looking at it.
Indeed, and I also want to point out and remind people that Mel Blanc himself was a Jew, so I always thought that was interesting that this Jewish man is doing this raving voice of Hitler. I don't know, it works. It's just
he does such a fantastic job with that. Honestly, I have to say, Russian Rhapsody is a great cartoon. There's so much energy in that. And when I get the rest of Mike Hausler video out, my interview with Mark Hausler, he talks a lot about it, and he tells some great stuff. I think he was the one who told me that I think Clampett actually wrote Gremlins from the Kremlin. I think those are his lyrics, which I always found super cool.
Nice.
And there was something else where I think Walt Disney, he was working on a Gremlin feature, and he told Schlesinger to stop making any cartoons with Gremlins. So Clampett was already way underway with Bugs Bunny and the Gremlin, which was going to be Falling Hair and Russian Rhapsody. So they finished those two, and that was it. I think they had more planned, but they had to scrap everything else.
I kind of like Russian Rhapsody. Out of all the World War II propagandas from Warner Brothers, this one will hold a place in my heart for some reason. Just them making fun of Hitler alone and his erratic movements while he's just ranting, and as Manny said earlier, and then on top of that, at the end where he's getting chased by his own plane, and only for him to crash into the ground. And then they sing the final gag, "We are gremlins," and then he just comes out and just says, "Nazis is the craziest peoples." Oh, and then I kind of like that end gag.
Oh yes, impersonating Lou Lear. That's just great.
When the Gremlins, I think, put the what is that cord in his nose, and he starts turning into a skunk, and then a jackass. And they add in a little bit of the Stalin joke in there as well. And I also kind of like the soundtrack for this cartoon, especially when Hitler's getting chased by his own plane.
Oh yes. Yes, indeed. So the next one is Hair Ribbon, which this one is actually notable for having two cuts. And you mentioned Austin Mark Hausler before. He's the one that supplied the print for the quote-unquote director's cut. I don't know if that's the right terminology for it, but it's the initial cut where you had Bugs Bunny actually literally shooting a dog himself, which is pretty dark. But in any case, no, this one, look, I liked it, and I liked the dog in this one. It's maybe not among my favorite of the later Clampetts per se, but it's got a lot of great gags in there, especially the cooking joke, and of course the whole boo. gotta love that. I mean, I try to get as low as possible. I know Manny could probably do it better than me, but don't boo.
That's terrible. I'm a tenor. I'm not a bass, so I can't sing that low. Sadly.
And you never will be. Sorry, that's another Simpsons reference there.
Well, I just want to say I love Hair Ribbon. This is probably one of my favorite Bugs Bunny shows from Clampett. Absolute favorite. And for both, I kind of like both endings, but I think the best ending is the original ending where Bugs Bunny shoots the dog, because it seems more hilarious there, because where it's unexpected for Bugs to actually murder one of his opponents. But we won't see it again until Raspity Rabbit by Fritz Freely. We won't see it again until when he kills a dude, he shoots a guy for coffee. But here, it was unexpected. The suicide gag, they kind of use suicide gags for like his last few cartoons, Itch in Time and Tortoise Wins by a Hair. It kind of gets stale. So I kind of think the Bug shooting the dog was kind of a little more funnier, but in a more unexpected way.
I was going to say with Hair Ribbon, well, first off, I don't know. It's like Huey was saying, it's probably not one of my favorite Clampett ones. I don't have a problem with Bugs being aggressive, but a part of me with the original cut is like, might be a little too on the nose with, him putting the gun in the mouth and You know, like I said, bravo for Clampett for trying something new, but maybe it was a little too much. But what I wanted to say was something that was brought up in Cartoon Logic, one of the podcasts I listened to that Komorowski did, and bringing up how, hopefully I'm not misquoting him, but saying how this cartoon may have been one of the factors in him leaving the studio, and not so much that Clampett's like, oh, I want to try something new, but it's like, dude, you've been getting away with murder for a long time, and this has got to stop because of the fact that, you know, Clampett, he was going over budget with this cartoon. He was using the water ripple effect, which costs even more money to do. And then on top of it, they had to completely reanimate the ending of the cartoon, adding even more to the budget. And I don't know the production timeline of this one. I'm assuming it, because the cartoon came out in 44, so Schlesinger was still the producer at the time. But it gets to a point, it's like, come on, guy, you're constantly going over the budget. You know, people are complaining, you know, from what I've read, people are saying that Clampett was able to get away with murder. And now we got to blow even more money trying to fix this ending because you had to be over the top. And, you know, I don't want to say it was like one of the final nails in the coffin of Clampett's tenure at the studio, but that's something that you could keep in mind or think about.
Honestly, it's been a while, but I like the original. I think it's a little like far-fetched, a little dumb where, you know, he shoves the gun in his mouth. But I think the new one is, and someone might have said this before, so don't quote me on this because it's not my original thought, but I think the new one where he hands him the gun is almost weirder. Like, killing a one character is another thing, because people do that all the time in cartoons. Maybe you don't see the on-screen death, but, you know, the Roadrunner might blow up Wile E. Coyote with dynamite, and that's fine. That'll kill him. But I think it's even weirder here, where Bugs is, like, handing him the gun, and he's like, go ahead, I dare you, almost, with, like, his little crap-eating face that McKimson gave him. Yeah, I think it's an okay cartoon. It's a little weird for me. It's, like, a little boring, almost, where it's routine, just like, oh yeah, Bugs is mean and he's gonna, you know, slowly like kill this dog, and then at the end he actually kills him, which is super weird. But yeah, I'm not a hater on the mean Bugs, like the mean-spirited Clampett Bugs, but to me, like, he's just not that interesting. He's just not that funny, which isn't to sell stuff like Tortoise Wins by a Hair Short, because that is a great cartoon, and he did some other good ones with the mean Bugs, but honestly, not a lot of them are my favorites.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. But moving on to Birdie and the Beast. So here's another absolute classic short. I love this one. I mean, I know I sound like a broken record when I say, you know, beautiful animation and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, you just have to say it because it's just so darn good.
Well, this being Leon Schlesinger's final Merry Melody, and also the second appearance of Tweety, the gags actually are solid here. And then also, I still like the naked Tweety. I know that cat is not a pro Sylvester, so but I do like the gags here. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but yeah, the gags here are actually solid. And I kind of enjoy like Mel Blanc's screaming here, especially. I guess me and Manny were watching that same Mel screaming compilation because it was actually on there as well, where the cat is like, fly! And then he just... And then I also like the end gag where the cat is... shoving around the nest for Tweety, and then he hands him the grenade, and after he just blows him up. And I don't know why, but this is what I'm saying about the badass Tweety from Clampett. He makes Tweety more interesting. I mean, First Feeling actually does some great work with Tweety, and I'm not a hater on it, but he kind of makes Tweety more like a damsel in distress, kind of, where he's relying on Granny sometimes, and it kind of just gets... I get it. He's trying to differentiate from Tom and Jerry a little bit, but I kind of like this Clampett Tweety.
I gotta say, I agree with the assessment for the most part, but I will say, I would think the only difference with the Clampett and the Freeling Tweeties, and I think, you know, they're both great sets of cartoons for what they are, I think the Clampett cartoons focus more on Tweety for the laughs, and I think people like that more because, you know, the classic two-step setup to a gag is expectation and reality. You look at the tiny bird and you're like, okay, well, that cat's going to eat the bird, but then the bird pulls out all the grenades and the slapstick, and that's what he does with Gruesome Twosome and this one, and Tale of Two Kitties, and those are great. But I think in the Freelings, you're looking towards Sylvester for the laughs. And I think those are funnier. And this is just me. I think the Freelings are funnier because not only was Freeling more controlled with his sense of comedy, like he wouldn't just unleash gag after gag like Clampett would have been. I mean, Clampett was like, I don't remember when he was born, but he couldn't have been older than 25 or so when he directed.
1913.
1913. So actually, okay, he was 31 when he was working on this one. But man, it feels almost like the Freeling Tweeties are better just because they're more controlled. And I always thought Sylvester was just funnier and more interesting than the Clampett Tweety was, just speaking from that point. And I also think that at this point there was Scribner, but there wasn't any sort of outrageously funny animator working for Clampett. And I think with Art Davis on the Freeling Sylvesters, I know I'm sort of getting off track, but I think Davis's work on those is really hilarious. Like, I think those make those cartoons a lot funnier than the Clampett Tweeties. I know that's a hot take. I know people are very pro Clampett these days and anti Freeling, but I just want to put that out there.
No, fair enough.
I don't know. I kind of like the sadistic Tweety. It's cute, but sadistic. Inside, it's one of those don't judge a book by its cover moments. That's why what kind of drew me into the Clampett Tweety a lot more. It's like Jerry Mouse, but I know I'm referencing a different cartoon, but that Tweety is more of this cute but yet sadistic fellow. That's what kind of drew me to him because of that.
Now, looking on to the next one is one of my favorite cartoons of all time. At least it is, you know, it's for me anyway. And I know that a certain website, the person running it absolutely hates this one for whatever crazy reason. But hey, you know, it's all opinions, of course. And that's, of course, it's Buckaroo Bugs. Gotta love it. I mean, wow. Buckaroo Bugs. I mean, I saw this one constantly as a kid. It was in a VHS compilation, an official one, because this is not public domain. And it had a lot of great cartoons, including this one. But boy, oh boy, say what you want about Don K, because he does a commentary on it, on the Gone Collection, right? But he makes a good point. And he points out a few really interesting things, like one thing where the horse, the horse has to change direction, right? So the horse somehow puts its head in its own butt and goes inside out and turns the other way. It's got this strange bits of animation. There's also like the hooves will turn to fingers when needed. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on about this cartoon. It is so good.
I like it well enough. It's the Clampett Bugs is, like I said, they're not my favorites, but they are sort of hard to dislike because there's this unbridled juvenile energy that you have to be like, okay, that's pretty funny. I mean, I like the opening a ton where Red Hot Rider's just sprinting across with this horse, and you know, I think there's some great animation there. It is pretty funny at parts, but I'm just not a big fan of the meaner Bugs. I like a lot of the later, like Freeling and Jones Maltese Bugs cartoons, because I think what they do is there's sort of a reason why Bugs is being provoked and why he's got to mess up with some guy. And there's a serious threat there, like in Racketeer Rabbit, where there's, you know, a gangster who's actually got a gun. And, you know, Red Hot Rider's got a gun here, but he's sort of dumb. And, you know, the second Bug sees him, right, he just starts cracking up, which is like, come on, man, I'm gonna beat the crap out of this guy for no reason. Which is good. It's a funny thing, but from like a character standpoint, I'm a little more bored at like this thing where Bugs is just up against a dumb, you know, slow villain, quote villain, and, you know, he just throws all the crap on him, and then that's the end of the cartoon. Over stuff like Racketeer Rabbit and the later Freeling stuff, where Freeling and Jones interchangeable, where you know, there's a genuine threat and Bugs has reason to act against someone. But I think here it's like he could have just left, you know, Red Hot Rider alone. You know, he doesn't have to go out of his way to be messing with him like he is. Honestly, I hate to be hating on it so much, but it's just not a favorite of mine, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I
kind of agree a little bit of what Austin's saying, but it's something about Clampett Bugs, like you said, this unbridled juvenile behavior. It's kind of rebellious in a way. He's kind of like a rebellious teen or a rebel in my case. Where in this cartoon, he actually has a villain role. So I don't know. It's just something about Clampett Bugs I'm just drawn to. After being showered with Chris Freeling and Chuck Jones over decades, it's kind of refreshing to see another director get the shine of Bugs Bunny, or like of directing Bugs Bunny, that had part in directing his Bugs Bunny cartoons. So that's what really drew me towards Clampett. A lot of things drew me toward it because he's different. And I'm the type of guy that when it comes to animation, I think being different is what draws me to a certain medium. This is why, like, when it comes to like, I don't want to go off track here. It's like when it comes to anime, I was more into Dragon Ball because it doesn't look like a typical anime, big bulgy eyes and some like spiky hair. It looks like something American made, where it doesn't look like an anime. But when you find out that it is, but it doesn't look like it. The art style is simplistic, and it's little things like that that can really get me interested in a type of genre. And that is my Dragon Ball reference for the day.
There you go.
There we go. Now, please tell me, Manny, you love this cartoon, because I feel like I'm the only one who thinks this is one of the greatest things ever made. Please tell me.
So if someone right now were like, name some of your favorite Warner Brothers cartoons, I mean, What's Opera Doc? The musician in me loves it. What's Opera Doc? Wabbit, Wobble, The Case of the Stuttering Pig, Baseball Bugs. Buckaroo Bugs makes that list. I love this cartoon.
Yay!
Sorry,
man.
fellas.
But okay,
points. The old farts like it. The younger guys don't. There you go.
I give you points off for Buckaroo Bugs on the list. Double points added for Case of the Stuttering Pig.
Of course, I of course had to throw that in there for you, Austin. But going back to, I mentioned before we were here, I showed a little clip of Buckaroo Bugs today at my job, and it went over incredibly well. I mean, every single time. I mean, now I know that, the overture to William Tell is from an opera written by Rossini in the 1800s, blah, 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 blah. But I can't help but think, when I was a little kid and hearing the finale of the overture, and in my head thinking, Brooklyn's own, here comes a red hot rider. Robert C. Bruce doing the narration in that part, and just how great it sounds. And then when the reveal happens, it's just how pathetic and goofy, Red Hot Rider is, and just the ending of that. And also another musical thing I could think of is the music of J.S. Semechnik. And, I actually learned a little bit more about him when I was in graduate school, because I was always in love with In the Stirrups. At the very end, when Bugs is telling the horse, no, here, when he's making him jump over the cliffs and everything, and I always get a kick out of it. But I will say that this cartoon, besides it being one of my absolute favorite shorts, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the final Leon Schlesinger cartoon that he gets production credit for, or producer credit. But this cartoon contains one of my absolute favorite lines of Warner Brothers history. When Bugs comes out and he starts laughing at Red Hot Rider, and he says, a fugitive from the funny papers. That line kills me every time I hear it.
We could go on and on about this, but I will point out one more thing about Buckaroo Bugs, is the fact that there's no wasted moment. Even when you just see the Red Hot Rider just standing there, he's just going, duh, duh. It's like you don't have to do stuff like that, and it's really weird that with Schlesinger being a notorious cheapskate, how Clampett got away with putting all that extra stuff, which, just face it, that would cost more money to do. But I'm glad he did it though. And it makes things a hell of a lot more funnier.
The gag that goes where Robert C. Bruce goes Brooklyn's fighting cowboy. I would notice that Mel Blanc is doing the typical Yosemite Sam voice when he's saying, whoa, horsey, before he switches over to the dopey sounding voice he normally does. I kind of like that little transition right there, where it kind of plays the viewer into thinking, oh, this is going to be some badass that's going to deal with this rabbit. And then he just turns out to be a dope. That's what I love about this cartoon. There's just a lot of things here you can't love, that you can't hate.
Next one is The Old Grey Hair. And this is another classic that I watched constantly because of Bugs Bunny Superstar. And also, who can forget at the very end when the dynamite explodes and the whole end title actually even shakes. I thought that was a nice little touch. And of course, we see Baby Bugs and Baby Alma, and it's one of those ones where it's really cute, got some, really out there animation, but it's just really sweet, I thought, seeing Baby Bugs and Baby Elmer. I mean, he certainly does it way better than what Chuck Jones did later on in the 80s when he did his old Baby Bugs and Baby Elmer short.
Well, the old gray hairs are in my beard, but for the cartoon itself, this was another, oh, that was a terrible joke. This was another cartoon I saw frequently as a kid. I loved the Clampett energy behind it. I really like Elmer's little kid voice. I get a kick out of it. Of course, Mel Blanc doing a higher version of his, the voice being sped up for the little bugs. I think the sinus is Mama Bunny, Papa Bunny, and Bugsy Bunny. I always got a chuckle out of that. And the gibberish translating into What's Opera Doc. That's another scene that always makes me laugh. But again, depending on who you ask, some people like the aggressive Clampett, some don't. I've always loved this cartoon, and it always makes me chuckle too when they start looking to the future, into the super far away world of the year 2000, and I'm just like, oh God, where does the time go? And seeing just how, I guess you could say, dated that scene is. But I mean, and now that I'm thinking about that scene in particular, I really like
television.
Smell-o-vision. It will replace television. I mark my words. It'll happen. Carl Salling says it. There's something that it came to my head right now, but I really like the design of Elmer's clothing in that scene in the beginning. It's like where he has like the green outfit and whatever, and I'm like, why wasn't that used more often? I thought it was like a nice, unique design for Elmer in that cartoon. But I mean, tons of laughs. Definitely one of the. I like Clampett Bugs. The only misfire for me, and it's not a bad cartoon, but the only misfire for Clampett Bugs for me is Hair Ribbon. But all the other ones I think work well, and this is another example.
But this means war, Manny.
Was that?
This means war, Manny.
Oh.
Oh boy.
What I want to say about the old gray hairs, I kind of like Clampett does get away with murder again at the end of this cartoon because the dynamite blows up, killing Elmer underground. I think when I first saw this cartoon, it was on the Golden Collection. And I do remember skipping past 15 cartoons back then was a lot to watch on a disc. So compared to like now, so I would just skim through certain cartoons that I liked the most. And when I rewinded it back, I saw the screen shake and I thought somebody, when they were filming it, they somehow tipped over a camera and that just happened. So I remember rewatching the cartoon and I remember laughing at the gag now because the thing blew up, because the dynamite blew up at the end. And I kind of like how Clampett did that there.
It's actually a double murder because he buries him alive and he blows him up. So there you go. He one-upped himself yet again. I would say. Moving right along to 1945. And again, we're getting closer and closer to the end. But the next one is Drafty Daffy. I mean, oh boy. This thing has so much gags. You can watch this over and over again and you still find something new. I mean, even I found something new when I covered it recently for the channel. I mean, it's wild. It's crazy. And it works so well. Although, I don't know why all of a sudden Daffy's not as patriotic, but anyway, that's another thing entirely.
Going back to what I said about the wisecracking duck, this thing, Drafty Daffy here, is the second most wacky Clampett cartoon with Daffy. I don't know, it's something about Clampett when he uses Daffy, he's phenomenal with using Daffy. Clampett's, the way he does cartoons, works well with Daffy. It's kind of like interesting here because we're fresh from 3 cartoons where Daffy is kind of in the war, where we have Daffy the Commando, then we have Scrap Happy Daffy, and then we have Plain Daffy. That is my favorite attachment short, so I know Austin's listening. But we're fresh from those 3 cartoons where Daffy's in the war. Now he's actually getting drafted and he's trying to get away from it. I kind of feel that makes him a lot human because he remembers that this is a war. So the possibility you're not coming back alive is 50-50. So I think a lot of people, when they think about getting drafted into the military, they often think about dying. That's what also comes with this. So Daffy probably doesn't want to die. It's easy for him to rant and rave at the beginning where he's saying hooray for the red, white, and blue, but he's not out there. So he's not seeing all the death and destruction. People have to think what these soldiers saw when they came back from the war. They were all messed up. And that's what I get from this.
I gotta say, it's a fantastic one. I think generally, speaking just from a personal point of view at least, I would think Clampett, his batting average is much higher with Daffy than it ever was with Bugs. That's just me. I don't know. I can't find anything to not like about stuff like Drafty Daffy. But if you nitpick really hard, there's stuff about like Buckaroo Bugs that you could be like, oh, well, that's a little sloppy. But whatever. I think this is a great one. There's so much energy in it. I love this and Wisecracking Duck, where it's a very simple setting, and there's just one other character. There's the little man from the draft board in this one, and then Wisecracking Duck, I think his name is Mr. Meek or whatever. But it's just inside, like, your typical suburban house, and he's just setting the stage for all the craziness and all the gags. I think it's fantastic. Clampett was good at that, setting a really nice atmosphere and using the setting to tell the story almost. And I think it was Huey who mentioned it in the last part where with Tale of Two Kitties, where, it slowly goes from like morning to sunrise to like noon to nighttime. I thought that was super cool. Anyway, Drafty Daffy. I know I was getting a bit off track. Drafty Daffy is a great cartoon.
Maddie, did you want to say something about it?
Well, now I wouldn't say that. No, this is definitely another great Clampett cartoon. And you guys brought up a good point. It's like he was super consistent with his cartoons with Daffy. And Huey, that was really like a nice like point that you brought up too about how, they're making fun of, it's a humorous situation. Like Daffy doesn't get drafted to the war, but then at the same time, kind of like what I was saying before Russian Rhapsody, it's like, sadly, you have to acknowledge too the reality of the situation at the time with Russian Rhapsody and with Hitler. And then with this one, it's like, you don't want to get drafted. It's humorous and funny. And, he literally has to go to hell to escape the little man from the draft board, and he fails. But, at the same time, I brought it up to some younger folks not that long ago. It's like, hey, the draft hasn't been around since the 70s. We've never had to experience that fear, albeit he was very comical in Daffy's case, but that fear that many soldiers had to deal with up until the end of the Vietnam War. But on a happy note, absolute great cartoon. I thought it was always really interesting that they had that really super realistic drawing of, I think it's of Douglas MacArthur when Daffy salutes the drawing. I think it's Douglas MacArthur or possibly Dwight Eisenhower. I don't know. I'm guessing it's MacArthur. I shall return. And I'll return back to you, Anthony.
Gruesome Twosome, which is the last Tweety that Clampett did. There's two bits of this cartoon that just crack me up every single time, mainly because of the randomness. One, that dog that just pops up and goes, I actually don't belong in this picture. That kills me every single time. Just this random dog, and of course, why would a dog want to kiss a cat? I don't know, but whatever, it's funny. And of course, just the innocence of Tweety with that bee, where he just slaps the bee around and just puts it in that costume that the two cats had. Oh my goodness. It's so good.
Oh yeah, this is a really great one. I would think it's the best of the three Tweeties he did, just because in the first one there's no real threat. I mean, the two cats are, they're going after Tweety and they want food and everything, and in the second one, I mean, that cat's just dumb. But here, like, there's actual motivation, and it's like their hormones and like libido are driving them, like, oh my god, we gotta get this bird, and like they're really going after Tweety. But I think it speaks volumes about that great concept, that dynamic that Clampett would have come up with, probably, where a tiny character, you don't expect him to beat the villain against all odds, but he beats the villain against all odds. Somehow, being like the size of just like one of the cat's fingers or toes, he just beats the crap out of them so badly at the end. And there's that great shot at the end where they're running off in the horse. I think it's a really fun cartoon. It's a great twist on a classic formula. I love the Clampett Tweety, honestly. I think It's a fantastic one.
Indeed.
Yeah, I do want to add, this inspired John K. to make Stimpy. I do want to add that. But also, yeah, I do like this cartoon as well. And I have to agree with what Austin said. But I also want to add a little joke. There's nothing like pursuit of women to make you do crazy things.
Amen.
Yep. Indeed. Now, for the next one, we have a remake, and again, I'm assuming this is because Clampett putting so much effort into some of these cartoons, he has to do a few quick ones, and this one is Wagon Heels, which is a remake of the unfortunately named Injun Trouble. That was a black and white Porky. And there's really not much that's changed between the two. There's a different ending, I believe, off memory, but I know that there was also some war references, buy bonds today, that sort of thing. Not really much to say about this one.
I do want to add, this being a Porky short, there's not really much I can really say about it. It's kind of funny at the end, but the jokes, they still kind of land a little bit, especially where Injun Joe finally gets annoyed with Sloppy Mo or Joe, whatever his name is, and it makes him tell him the secret and finds out he's ticklish. I mean, after, I think that the joke kind of landed better in the 30s than it does in the 40s, because I think in the 40s, even I start to get annoyed with him saying, I know something I won't tell. And I kind of felt what Injun Joe was feeling like, what is the secret at this point? But it's a pretty skippable cartoon. When I watched it in the Golden Collection, it was pretty skippable.
The next one is a pretty nice one, The Bashful Buzzard. So this one's a pretty good one.
I think it's a pretty funny one. You put it up against Bugs Bunny Gets the Boyd. I don't think there's any contest. I think the Bugs Bunny one is much funnier, much better executed. And I think in that one, there's, with Bugs, who was becoming such the popular character that he was, I think there was more motivation to do a really nice job and for Clampett to sort of put his all into that. But like you were saying, I mean, I think this and Wagon Heels was sort of his cool down period before he would do his last few cartoons that are just, if he's firing on all cylinders, and I'm so excited that we get to talk about those soon. But, this one's almost like a spot gag one in bits where, he's just going around and trying to get food for, the family. It's nothing special, but there are funny bits. I like the farmer being in midair and milking the cow and then realizing it's a great Manny Gould scene where he realizes he's not on ground and he flips out and falls. But honestly, that's the only highlight. That's all comes to mind when I think about this one. Nothing special, but there's still stuff to like, which is true with all 40s Clampett, I would think.
I do like when Beaky's getting chased by the dragon. Was that a dragon?
Yeah.
I think it's like a dinosaur or something, yeah.
A dinosaur dragon thingy, which is a sign of things to come for Clampett, because he'll do the Beanie and Cecil stuff later on.
But when he starts, I think when Beaky looks at it, he's like, "Come here, shorty," and it's really small, and then this is where the perspective goes and I kind of like this little gag here where Beaky goes, "You piece of shoe leather," where he's trying to say a curse word, but he's not gonna say. He says shoe leather. Instead, I kind of like that little gag right there. And then we turn around and see him still grabbing this little turtle dragon thing by its neck. And it's a whole big creature. And then its face turns even huger than when we first saw it. But yeah, that's my little 2 cents of that.
But as Austin mentioned, and I do agree with him, that this seemed to be a little bit of a down period until we get to right now, which is book review. I mean, wow. Here's another one I watched constantly. And I mean constantly.
Watch the review. Give Anthony more views. No.
No.
Absolutely great cartoon. I really don't want to repeat myself on because, I tend to repeat myself all the time. It's one of the cartoons that was like the zenith of his energy. And, we're going to get into even more where it's like, this is right at Clampett's peak. The other ones we talked about, like Drafty Daffy and the ones from 44, 45, it's like, it's getting more and more dynamic, more and more energetic. And right here, 46, some of the releases in 46, they're all masterpieces. I don't know what else to say a book review that I didn't already say before, but I think you mentioned it in the review itself where it's like every time you watch it, you discover new things. And it always gets you. It's just the energy and the music and the animation, whatever. And what a perfect ending to the Books Come to Life series of cartoons that Warner Brothers started back in the harmonizing era. I think it was smart that Clampett made this cartoon and nobody ever attempted to make another Books Come to Life cartoon after it, because it was just it's perfection. You can't top it.
I kind of like this cartoon a lot better than Akoi Decoy, where I think Akoi Decoy, they kind of took some material from there and put it in book review a little bit, especially with the library. This is Clampett's comeback period, his big send-off here, where he actually maxed out and actually did a lot better than in 1945. I do like the gag where the wolf is pouring salt on Daffy's leg, and if you freeze frame it, he turned and it's like a big giant eye. I love how that was done, especially with Daffy singing that song that he was singing. And then also when he's telling Little Red Riding Hood not to go in the house because the wolf was there, and he said, "Big bad wolf for the Zootsuke."
Beautiful. I know you're partial to Detached and stuff, I know, but where does this rank with you in the whole books come to life? Well, saga, if you will.
Well, it's hard not to put it at the top, obviously. But what some people call Tashland's like all-time worst cartoon, which is Speaking of the Weather. I don't know what it is. I love that cartoon. And
Wait, people
incredibly...
say that's bad?
They think it's that one, and I think You're an Education.
Castles? I love
them. Those three. I love the trio, but that one particularly is lazy. Speaking of the Weather, because there's so much tracing and stuff. But honestly, when I didn't even know there was any tracing of old like Bosco Buddy stuff until I looked it up and like someone told me, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
They don't come for plain Daffy, then we don't got a problem.
Yeah, no, but it's a fantastic cartoon book review. It just so much energy, so many great gags. Like, even as a kid, one of the first Warner Brothers DVDs I ever owned was the second Spotlight collection. And there's a lot of topical stuff here, like stuff that would have related to, the time. And, this one would have been completed in 45, like summer 45 or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff that relates to that. There's like even, I think, a war gag or two. But as a kid, like, you don't even have to know what any of those jokes mean. Like when they reference the Henry Aldridge radio show with the classic Henry gag and, Coming Mother, that one. You don't even have to know that show to just be like, that's stupidly hilarious. I love that. Yeah, it's such a great cartoon. I also have to say, the Mel Blanc line where the wolf's put in prison, it's like a 10-second scene where he's put in front of the judge and the judge and the wolf and like this backup vocalist group, they all just start breaking out into song. They put the wolf in prison and then just slam his head with a club. That whole scene is like one of my all-time favorites. Mel Blanc's line at the end, "You can't do this to me." It's so funny. It's just my all-time favorite Blanc performance.
Chef's
Honestly, a great cartoon.
Chef's kiss on the singing too.
Chef's
by the
kiss,
way.
indeed.
Wow.
I'm going to sample that. So every time a message comes through on the phone, I will have that. You can't do this to me. I'll make sure that's the new tone for it for sure. But I mean, the next one, Baby Bottleneck. I mean, what is there to say about this one? Again, it's much like Drafty Daffy. The gags just come at you thick and fast. It's just insane. I still notice new things every time I watch this, and I believe it's also the last Clampett, Porky, and Daffy, unless you count the cameo of Porky in Great Piggybank Robbery. Manny, I know you weren't on the track. I know you were not happy you weren't on the track, but here's your chance. What do you have to say about Baby Bottleneck?
I do all the work, and Anthony gets all the credit. Oh, Briaco.
Yeah, but
well, where's the lie? Where's the lie?
Oh, that is true. Absolutely incredible cartoon. So much energy behind it. I mean, I'm repeating myself at this point because, energy equals Clampett. We all know that at this point. What I was saying before with Buckaroo Bugs, how I instantly think of the finale of the William Tell Overture. I think of In the Stirrups from J.S. Zemeckis. I always tell people, if you want like the gold standard of Powerhouse from Raymond Scott, watch this cartoon. Because I think it's the best use of it in any of the Warner Brothers cartoons. The whole scene with the babies in the conveyor belt, I love just how the music sounds in that scene. And going with the cute visuals of like a little puppy and whatever. I love the scene where they're burping the baby eggs and the burp, burp,
always makes me laugh. They're feeding the milk to the turtle, and how annoyed he gets when it soaks up his entire shell. And some of the little like line, I mean, I always get a kick out of Porky Stutter. I've said it before. Porky's my favorite character. Akron, Hullabaloo Wood. The way he delivers that line, Mel Blanc, chef's kiss. And Johnny did do quite a little, and I forgot, I think that was a reference to somebody in real life. And then speaking of that scene right after that, that dog is one of the best, like, blink and you'll miss it characters in Warner Brothers history. It's like, if I think of like minor characters that only appeared once, it's like, or once or twice, I would say that dog from Baby Bottleneck, of course, Lawyer Goodwill, the Tashlin dog in Porky and Fireman. But especially with this dog in this cartoon, like, he's only on screen for a few seconds. Listen, Jackson, your productivity will go up 1 billion, not 100%, 1 billion%. It's a Lulu. And just, I can't even describe the scene because it just makes me crack up so much. Well, back to the drawing board.
And it serves a purpose as well. It's not random it's kind of random, but it is. But there's also a purpose to it. Like
it's a non sequitur done well.
Exactly.
I enjoy this cartoon, especially the Porky and Daffy duo is the best duo, hands down. But I do want to add, I kind of like the little beginning joke when Daffy's on the phone and he's saying, "Oh, you haven't got that boy yet? Wait, first you don't succeed." And then I think where it really cracks me up is where not just the babies on the conveyor belt, the cute imagery, but also when Porky is forcing Daffy to sit on the egg, and you just see the shenanigans just start to ensue right there. And then Daffy just pulls out an entire wooden board and just hits Porky with it. That's where I just started cracking up. And then he just starts laughing wildly. And then I like this little scene where he's pulling on Daffy's leg and it just starts getting longer and longer. And then as soon as he lets go, and then you just see him pulling his leg. And I kind of like when you freeze frame, you see all the takes, the wild takes that they drew. When I saw one of the cute the babies on the conveyor belt, one of the little birds looked like updated Tweety.
Cameo.
Yeah.
It was technically a prototype Tweety, even though Tweety existed by this point. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, just don't drop your monocle there, Manny, because.
Sorry. One more thing. Another line that I frequently quote in real life comes from this cartoon. My spelling of out. It's sitting on eggs is out. OWT out. And I'll purposely spell out wrong, and nobody knows why.
Best thing to do, indeed.
It's such a great, really just a fantastic cartoon. The one thing I have to say about it is I've never been a big fan of like the beginning where it's funny but it's a little slow going. And what I like about book review is it's full on just constant energy and gags. But at the beginning, when you're sort of setting up and you're getting those still shots of the newspaper, it feels a little slow, but when you get into it, it's fantastic. And the Raymond Scott renditions on the conveyor belt scene and the dog walking into the office. I have to say, actually, Manny used the term blink and you miss it. I actually think I did blink when I was a kid watching this one, because when I rewatched this cartoon like 2 years ago, and I got to that scene with the dog walking into Porky's office, I was like, wait, where'd this guy come from? I don't remember this at all. I legitimately, I forgot about the entire thing, and I was so happy to see it. It's a great Bill Melendez sequence. Just was promoted to animator after assisting the great Scribner for so long. He worked on this one, Scribner did, Izzy Ellis, Manny Gould. There's a theory that McKimson did a scene or two on it. It's a fantastic cartoon, and those artists are really, I think, my favorite part about it. There's so much flavor and energy in every different scene. They all bring something new to the table, and I know this is something that, like, only me personally here can really relate to, being, like, the nerdy one who identifies all the animators, but it's so cool when I'm watching, and I go, oh, we go from Scribner to Ellis, and Ellis to Scribner, the Akron Hollywood scene where he's looking through the egg. I think there's a switch there from Scribner to Ellis that's so casual. That's blink and you miss it. Where there's one frame where Porky's facing the camera and he turns a bit and then it's a whole new artist. It goes from Scribner to Izzy Ellis, just like that. I think that's so cool. It's like Clampett's extreme casting. He's like, you're good for this scene. You're also good for this scene, but you're only good for like the last 2 seconds of it. So you can add in, you can cut in right here. I think that's crazy. He was breaking a lot of boundaries with that and this one just in general. Oh, and I have to add, before I cut myself off, the ending, that perspective shot where Porky's coming out of the crotch of the diaper. I don't know what Clampett, I don't know if he was consciously trying to show an image there where Porky's little bald head, like his pale skin colored head shooting out of like the crotch pocket and like the mother's in shock. I don't know if he was implying anything there, but if he was, that is awesome. That's a great gag, great cartoon.
Moving on to, I mean, we could talk about that one all day, really. That's how good it is. But here's another one we could probably talk about all day, which is, of course, Kitty Cornered. I know Huey was on the track for that, and yeah, it was a great track as well. I mean, how random are some of the jokes? I mean, for me, just those drunk and smoking cats in that one scene, and then you see an oversized Porky head for one split second, which when you freeze frame it, it makes no sense, but in the context of everything, it's really, really funny. But also Teddy Roosevelt, they just randomly become Teddy Roosevelts for some weird reason. And of course, we gotta love, what did the man say? Huh? You gotta love that too. I've always loved dopey voices, especially like in Buckaroo Bugs, and here, of course, what did the man say? Huh? That kind of ridiculous one.
Oh man, I could be here all day. Really, this might be my favorite Clampett, honestly, of all time. Wow. I mean, those who know me, I'm a big fan of the 30s stuff, like the black and whites. This might top all, honestly. It's so random at times in that scene where they've gotten Porky out and they're just sitting in the living room, and there's like a cat with like a comic or something. There's one with like a box of bonbons, and the other one's got like 18 cigars or something just sticking out of his mouth. It's so funny, and Porky just shows off his big fat head. I don't know, it's so awesome. I could go on and on, but man, you could make an argument that Clampett's just energy and like throw this in here, that sort of approach to filmmaking like made his stuff weaker. But honestly, from like an entertainment standpoint, that's the way to go. That's what he's doing for 7 straight minutes, or however long this one is here. It's fantastic, and I think you can tell in bits of book review and Baby Bottleneck and Great Piggy Bank Robbery, there are a ton of still shots and moments where you're like, he's doing that so he can save the money for later. So those cartoons are like 96, 97% crazy. This one's 110% crazy. There's not a slow second about it. From the very beginning, where we slowly pan over the town and all these cats just start getting kicked out of the house, I think it's so funny. It's just a great cartoon. And I also think this quartet of cats, that 3 of which like never showed up ever again, I think they are so awesome. If only the guys who were doing the Looney Tunes cartoons for HBO Max right now would make more with these 3 cats that just never show up again. I think they're so funny, and I think the Clampett Sylvester, I wish we saw a ton more of him, man. I think Porky is great as the love-to-hate straight man here, where, he's just trying to kick these little cats out. And from the beginning, it's established, they're just giving him the boot. They won't have it. And then the rest of the cartoon, the conflict set up. I love that, where Porky's just there sort of to move along the chaos. He doesn't have a major role in this one. It's really a cartoon that stars Sylvester and his little gang. But I would have loved to see more cartoons take that approach, where you're not looking to Porky for the entertainment value. Because on his own, face value, he's not a very interesting character. I think he works really well here. But anyway, Kitty Cornered, I could be here all day. Fantastic cartoon.
Yeah,
one of the all-time best.
Because you can also mention the scenes like, Henry, I think there's somebody in the house. That kind of, you can go on and on and on. But Huey, what were you going to say?
This is what I enjoy about Clampett. He could take a simple plot, something simple, and manage to make it into something so ridiculous yet funny at the same time. This is exactly what I like about his cartoons. Like when you look at an old season, like the first season of South Park, or a regular show, how the plots just get ridiculous, how the story just gets more ridiculous in a short matter of time. Is exactly how Clampett is. But that's what I want to say about this cartoon.
Of course, for sure.
It's a nice way of saying, to quote the 1936, was a Van Buren cartoon, Bold King Cole, Manny, you talk too much, you never shut up, you talk too much. So I have a few points. I haven't seen that one in a while. I'm not afraid of anything. All right, back from Van Buren to Warner Brothers.
All right, you guys pretty much nailed all the main points. There's just a few particular lines that always make me laugh. I mean, cartoon's a masterpiece, goes without saying. I, in real life, don't like this food, but that little cat, every time he says, I like cheese, makes me laugh. Even though I hate cheese, I'll purposely say, I like cheese, like the mouse. And people are like, wait, don't you hate cheese? I'm like, it's a cartoon. Okay, Manny, we get it. You reference a lot of cartoons. And then they'll like cut me off. Anthony already said it before. Duh, what did the man say? Kills me every time. And it's another small little thing, but when Porky, just before he sicks Lassie onto the dogs, and every time, I think it happens 2-3 times in the cartoon, but when Porky's like threatening the cats and you see all the cats drunk and they go the that little laugh that Mel Blanc does, it floors me every time I hear it. It's like Mel Blanc was able to do so much with so little. Oh, see, like I'm thinking, like after this commentary, I'm like, man, I think I need to binge on some of these final Clampett cartoons, because just talking about them is, I'm laughing, I'm smiling, I'm seeing in my head. I mean, I used to see this one. Oh, how could I forget the random moose being pulled out of the wall?
Oh man.
So good.
You brought up like so many things I totally forgot about. There's so much stuff. The I like cheese and that subtle laugh when they're drunk. Oh my god, it's so funny. He packed so much into that little 7-minute period. That's really something that's not easy to do.
Indeed, but moving on, because yeah, okay, we could be all day with that one, but oh great. Looking at the next one, we could be all day with this one too. I mean, the Great Piggy Bank Robbery. Another one I watched constantly as a kid, and you know, it's also John K's favorite cartoon. I know I don't really like bringing up his name, but, you know, if it wasn't for him, you wouldn't get Ren and Stimpy, and, you know, Ren and Stimpy is a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. But that aside, look, I mean, how great is the Great Piggy Bank Robbery? I love the whole, Dick Tracy parody in this particular show, especially with all the villains. I mean, Dick Tracy has a lot of colorful villains, and, you know, whether you love or hate the 1990 movie that they did, they at least did that right. He's got an amazing set of villains that Clampett just goes like Wolfman and, you know, the Neon Noodle and all these stupid versions. Like, in fact, my favorite shot in this cartoon is probably the least animated of all. It's just a guy that's just, it's just a background and he just got a few planes taken off the guy's head. And it's like, what's that guy's deal? You know, do you guys remember that bit?
I think flat top,
I definitely remember that. Yeah, I remember that shit.
It's just you just hear the plane says, it just, and then of course, you know, I'm gonna rubber you out. See, of course, yeah.
I'm gonna rub you out, Steve. And furthermore, it's unbelievable.
It's so good. I think again, we could be here all day with this one.
This is peak Clampett, no doubt about it. This is really peak Clampett right here. Even though this is where he's leaving soon, this is the peak of his greatness right here. This cartoon specifically, especially in his Daffy cartoons, this is the most fast-paced, most zany Daffy cartoon in existence compared to the other two. This one right here, I pretty much enjoyed most of these gags, the gangsters that they showed, the noodle neck, rubberhead, Batman.
Yeah.
Definitely one I saw often growing up. It definitely deserves all the hype it gets. Huey, I was thinking of you just now because you're saying like this is like Clampett at his absolute peak, and I'm thinking all the cartoons we were talking before it, I was thinking of Dragon Ball, and it was like, this isn't even my final form, and you know, this is Clampett at 100% power, battling on Namek, and there's my Dragon Ball reference for the day. But absolute classic.
Gold reference right there.
Yeah, there you go. Gold like a Super Saiyan. All right, anyway. But the phone scene, just when Daffy is fielding all the calls and then you're hearing Powerhouse playing in the background. I know we don't like, well, we have to bring it up anyway, but, you know, John K., when he does the commentary and he talks about how, and probably I'm misremembering it, but like none of these drawings work by themselves, like individually, like the posing and everything is just all over the place. But yet it comes together so beautifully. Just that the panic and nervousness that Daffy's getting, and he starts breaking all the phones. I'm Duck Twiffy. I love the little gag where he talks on the French phone, and you hear the Latin Quarter playing about French phone. always got a nice kick out of that. I really do like in the beginning too when he gets the Dick Tracy comic. I mean, cheap joke coming. This is, whenever Austin buys a new comic book, he reacts the same way and he gets all excited. And, but I love it's like seeing that childlike enthusiasm coming out of Daffy, just reading his Dick Tracy comic and being so excited. You guys were saying before, it's just like Clampett was, if I'm not mistaken, he was the youngest director. Yeah, he was the youngest director at the time. And just letting that childhood enthusiasm and how appropriate, a bunch of us talking about cartoons, and just seeing our enthusiasm come out. And I think Clampett was the best at expressing that joy and that energy throughout his stuff.
Speaking as like a comic book nerd, like I do relate to Daffy so much here, especially when I was a kid and I would have been watching this one around the same time. I was getting very much so enamored with like the idea that I could just have comic books like delivered to my door with like eBay and like subscription mail stuff when I was like 6 or 7. Like this was so cool to see, like, one of the coolest cartoon characters I'd ever known, like literally acting just like I would when a comic would show up in the mail. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. That's only setting up for the best part of the cartoon, where you get into it and there are all these great villains with Duck Tracy. I mean, there's so much to love about it. I could go on and on, honestly, but I gotta say, when I was watching this one, I was almost thinking, like, Daffy's never characterized like this, like, as the kid that Clampett makes him look like here. I was almost thinking that Clampett was sort of trying to make Daffy feel like Bob Clampett, right? Because from all the recollections we hear about Clampett, he's like this very crazy, like, guy stuck in like the mindset of a teenager or almost a kid. I'm almost wondering if like this specific characterization is supposed to relate to Clampett's own personality, which I know is like a bit far-fetched, but I was thinking about that when I was rewatching it earlier. But yeah, Great Big Bang Robbery, really, really fantastic cartoon, I have to say.
Of course, and I have to say, that's the last short that has Clampett's directing credit on it, which I was actually surprised, by the way. I thought there was like at least 1 or 2 more, including at least one of the ones I'm about to mention, but it's basically the end of an era. I mean, Clampett leaves, but there's a few cartoons left in various stages of completion, and these ones we'll just quickly go through because, well, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, they're not perhaps the greatest. But starting with The Call to Arms. Now, this one, in stark contrast with the last few we did, boy, is that a mess. That is an absolute mess. I mean, I do feel for, I think it was Art Davis. He completed that one.
Yeah, Art Davis.
Yeah. And so you've got genuinely funny scenes with this wolf character, which I think must have been Clampett's own version of the Tex Avery wolf. And the Lauren Bacall scenes are genuinely really interesting to see, and it would have been great to have a few shorts done in that style, maybe some sort of a serious detective story or whatever, in another series. But ultimately, yeah, it was a huge mess. They even reused stuff from a Freeze Feeling cartoon, just inserted in at random. I don't know. I don't think much of it. I mean, do any of you guys like that one?
I mean, my first time seeing that one was on the Golden Collection, and I did see it, but after seeing it once, I kind of would just skip to Bucket of Bugs right after, which was the second cartoon on that disc. So it's a pretty skippable cartoon. The wolf scenes are funny. The Lauren Bacall stuff is funny. I think that's like the only Rochester gag I think I managed to laugh at, because I didn't know what racial stereotyping was at the time. But other than that, yeah, it's maybe watchable once.
I gotta say, I think it's funny for all of the horrifically wrong reasons. Like the fact that someone actually put this out, Clampett or Davis or a combo of the two or whoever, thinking that it was actually going to entertain people. Like, I find that so funny, because from like this standpoint, at the standpoint of a regular cartoon, it's like the biggest fat and steaming hot mess I've ever seen. But on the other hand, like the fact that it's so horrible in that sense makes it hilarious, right? Like there's so many cuts and like quick, scene changes that don't even make sense. Like I laugh so hard at this one when I'm watching it, because I'm like, it's so stupid. But anyway, I defend it for that reason and that reason only.
I think it's like watching a train wreck. You can sort of you can't turn away. I think that's how it is. But the big snooze, though, admittedly, yeah, this one is perhaps, I don't know, what would you guys say, maybe 80% Clampett or something?
I think
85.
maybe about like 55% Clampett.
It's a crazy short, the big snooze. I mean, it's got a lot of great things in it, and you can sort of see perhaps where Clampett was going to go with it had he completed the whole thing. But at least, unlike the Call to Arms, yeah, it's a bit of a mess, but it's still this was actually a fun mess. It was some great stuff, like, of course, Elmer with that beautiful dress. I mean, and a lot of the surreal imagery that you see in this one, similar to some of Clampett's earlier shorts.
Well, I did notice about the big snooze was the beginning gag was kind of funny, but then when I realized, oh, this is just a reused gag from all this and Rabbit Stew. I kind of like the idea of Elmer quitting his job. It kind of symbolizes Bob Clampett leaving the studio in a way. This is kind of like, I want to say, Fritz Freeling's You Ought to Be in Pictures, which, don't get me wrong, I like this cartoon, but I kind of think Fritz Freeling's take is a little better when a cartoon character leaving and ripping up his contract to go pursue something else. Because even though it's the same plot, but different, where Bugs Bunny is tormenting Elmer into getting his contract back in his dreams versus Daffy tricking Porky into getting out of his contract. But in the end, the plot is still the same. But I kind of think Fritz Freeling did it better with the live action stuff than this one.
I saw this one a fair amount growing up on TV. I've always liked it. It's funny now that we were talking about the piggy bank robbery and kitty cornered and all that. It's like, yeah, I mean, this one's not as great as I remember. It's a nice ending to the Clampett era at Warner Brothers, you could say. Now I noticed that it's a bit choppy in places. But I mean, there's moments I've always enjoyed. Just before Bugs falls asleep and he's singing September in the Rain, I've always liked that part. The beginning of the dream sequence when Bugs is singing Someone's Rocking My Dreamboat. And then it goes to that really weird cut where he starts poking the clouds. And I was like, oh, okay, you can see the choppy nature of the cartoon. You hear some Raymond Scott dinner music for a pack of hungry cannibals when he starts trashing the dream. And the rabbits are coming scene, I've always got a kick out of that. Or I like the manic energy. Oh no, here comes the super chief. And seeing all those mini bugs is going over Elmer's head. And the whole scene where Bugs and Elmer doing that wacky dance to Chicken Reel. And then it jumps into like the Russian dance in the middle. I always got a kick out of that scene. Now after going all nerdy and insane over the previous shorts, it's like, it's not as good as I remembered. And good point on the whole comparison between this and You Ought to Be in Pictures. It's like, yeah, you want to talk about a character quitting the studio? Go watch that. This is not a bad short by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kind of like if he ended his proper term on a short like Kitty Cornered or The Great Piggy Bank Robbery, it would have been like the perfect ending to his tenure at the studio. I mean, technically, yeah, you also have the Goofy Gophers, which we're going to talk about. But I mean, this is to me like the definitive final Clampett short that he had a significant chunk of stuff made before he left the studio.
So just to wrap this up, because we're getting close to the end, but with these three, I'm about to mention now, Birth of an Ocean, I didn't realize Clampett had an involvement in that.
Thad mentioned it on his blog. He did a Stan Freberg post. It might have been Clampett, might have helped Foster write it, Warren Foster, and he might have also supervised the recording session with Stan Freberg, and then that was sort of all that he really had to do with it. But there was some sort of Clampett involvement to an extent.
Sure.
So it's obviously more McKimson.
Exactly, yeah, because that was definitely seems like Clampett involved the least. And then you got Goofy Gophers, which has some wonderful animation. You can definitely see some Clampett involvement, even if it's only minor. And of course, the big one, Tweety Pie, which started out as as a fourth Clampett Tweety, and then Frizz took over and
got the Academy Award.
Yeah, so at least we're ending this podcast on a very high note that even though Clampett didn't directly win that Oscar, he still led the studio to actually winning their first Oscar, which I think is pretty cool. And just briefly, I'll let everyone know, look, so after this, Clampett then went on and he did Beanie and Cecil for television, which achieved its own success. And there was also a cartoon series. And later on, he started touring around college campuses. He was part of Bugs Bunny Superstar. And then he passed away in, what was it? I think it was 1984.
84, yeah, that's when he died.
Yeah, something like that.
84. So 1 year before I was born. So what an incredible journey. I know we have to do it in 2 parts for that reason. So boys, just final thoughts about Clampett. So whether it's overall or just this part, I mean, we'll start with you, Manny. Just your final thoughts.
If only he stayed on longer. And it's too bad we'll never get a definitive answer as to why he left. But I mean, the rate he was going near the end of his tenure, it's like, what could have been? I mean, clearly he's one of the most well-known. He's one of the legends in animation history. And for better or for worse, he's a huge influence on the current crop of Looney Tunes cartoons that are on HBO Max. I think sometimes, I mean, not so much now, but especially like when I was growing up in the 90s, how, and it was because he was the only one that was still alive, how all the emphasis was on Jones, and not knocking Jones, and I don't want to get into the whole Jones versus Clampett hullabaloo, but I'm glad that now people are starting to recognize just how amazing Bob Clampett's work was. And, you know, part of it was his entire filmography was part of the Guild Films and AAP package, which wasn't as, I guess you say, wasn't as well known as the post 48 cartoons. So, you know, luckily I was able to see his black and white stuff on Nickelodeon and the cartoons that we just discussed on Turner Networks growing up, and I got to experience it. But, you know, I'm glad he got the recognition he deserved, even though, you know, he was a bit of a showman and he liked to stretch the truth. But I mean, I love his stuff, and I don't want to say he's my favorite director because I do enjoy different directors for different things. But Avery changed the Warner Brothers style. He helped create the Warner Brothers style. But as someone else said before, Clampett really was the one to put the Looney in Looney Tunes. And it's a shame that once he left, that energy started subsiding. So thank you, Bob, for plenty of laughs.
Indeed. Huey, your thoughts? Final thoughts?
I kind of agree with Manny. It's a shame he didn't stay longer. 1946 seems way too early for him to leave, but he did put the Looney in Looney Tunes. I'll give him that, because him and Tex Avery were, I think, some among my favorite directors of Warner's filmography, because his erratic style, his rebellious way of doing cartoons, his way of being different, even though he didn't follow the normal standard, how everyone else was doing, he did his own. And that's what I kind of respect him for. He was kind of like an early Trey Parker and Matt Stone from South Park. He was kind of like that, or I could say J.G. Quintel for Regular Show. He's kind of like that. And so it's good to see now that we're getting this recognition from him. I didn't really see most of his black and white cartoons growing up, but good thing I had the Laserdisc, the MGM Laserdisc, which had some of his package, some of the cartoons in his package in there. I was lucky to get that until the Golden collections came out, and then the Porky Pig 101. And it was nice to see how he grew as a director. I do agree, he didn't, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have gotten Ren and Stimpy later on. I don't really like John Kay, but I do like Ren and Stimpy. But if it wasn't for Clampett, we wouldn't have gotten that. There's a lot of cartoons that have a lot of Clampett-esque kind of humor nowadays. So I just want to say, yeah, thank you, Clampett.
Indeed. And finally, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, wow, it's almost sentimental. It's like I'm working at the studio right now. I mean, we've come full circle from when I was starting on the videos, and I was on Urine Education, which was Tashlin's last cartoon, and that was when Clampett was just getting started. And now, you know, we've talked about so many cartoons. We talked about all of his great, you know, 40s color cartoons here today, and now he's gone, you know, just like that. But man, he really did, like you said, Huey, he did put the Looney in Looney Tunes. Him and Tex Avery, I gotta say. Those two men, I would say, are the reasons we know the Warner Brothers cartoons like we know the Warner Brothers cartoons today. Yeah, Manny, I think it was you who said it, but I wish we knew why he left Warner Brothers. Honestly, I think just the general assumption is he was, you know, clearly just looking towards other things. I mean, we call Tashlin the greatest yo-yo, but you know, I think Clampett in a way was a dreamer, and in a sense that Tashlin never was. I mean, I think Clampett was always sort of searching to make a better cartoon and break the boundaries and be funnier and funnier. But I think at this point, when he was, so fed up with management and making all these crazy, jokes that got censored and everything, I think he was like, man, I'm out of here. And his contract, I think, was only renewed like once every month or something anyways, and all the other directors were on like annual contracts like you would usually be. But, for all that people say about like all those endless black and white Porkies that no one really remembers a ton about, and that's like 10 cartoons of 100 he might have done, 120. Everything else is so great. So much energy, so much to laugh at, so much to love. I mean, honestly, Clampett, next to Tashlin, he might be my favorite director. I gotta hand it to him. He made so much great stuff. So thanks for everything, Clampett, and good luck with Beanie and Cecil.
Yes, exactly.
I don't want to add I think maybe the reason why he left was because when Leon Schlesinger wasn't there to really protect him anymore, he really got a lot of leniency because Leon was a friend of his mom, I think. So maybe could have added some form of why he managed to get away with a lot of stuff in his cartoons.
I agree. I think he got fed up. I want to add this real quick. I think he actually, when Seltzer came in, he probably just got sort of tired with trying to adjust to this new management, and it would have been about 8 months into the Seltzer period where he clocked out for good. So you're probably onto something there, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. It's a lot of time. It happens. It's like kind of a favoritism thing where a guy that comes doesn't know you, so now you're back at the bottom, and now you're only your small amount of privilege that you had is gone. So now, if I'm not going to sit here and he's not going to sit here and censor my art, so he's going to leave. It's kind of selfish in a way, but
you got to do what you got to do. It's as simple as that. We all have those moments where we feel we need to move on from something, and that's what happened here. But in any case, thank you all so much for listening to this. I know it was a long one, but I hope it's a good one. I hope you all enjoyed it. I mean, I know I enjoyed recording this. I'm sure you guys enjoyed it as well. But until next time, there'll be more of this sort of content to come. So thank you all so much, and take care.
You too.
See ya.
See you.
That's all, folks.
Well, anyway, that pesky wabbit is out of my wife forever and ever.
Well, now, I wouldn't say that.